just started the recording. It's about 10 o'clock at the top of the hour. And first thing I want to do is thank everybody for being here. This is a big project. The Envision Speaker Series has been a project in development. And so, with every conversation, with every new connection, with every relationship, this thing grows and grows and grows. And I'm so appreciative for one, all of you to be on the call, and two, specifically for those people who are going to join me in conversation. And like Tim said earlier, this is about empowering people, changing people's lives, and giving people in the embrace of this particular Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, help, hope, and healing. And so our focus today is health and happiness. And so, Brenda, you're a bit early, but I appreciate you being on the call. Eileen, we're going to jump in for about an hour or so. I'm going to get started with Timothy Dean Smith. And so, in order to get this started, let's understand and appreciate what the Envision Speaker Series is. It's designed to bring professionals to the table, virtually speaking, or even in person. And I do believe we're going to set up some in-person events in 2024 to make impact and change in our world. Our world seems to be falling apart in every possible way. And this group of people right here in front of me is going to help change all of that. And so at least that's my hope and prayer as we go forward. Timothy, are you ready to get into a conversation?
I was ready days ago, Dr. McNally.
Well, then the first thing I'm going to say is I got this thing in front of me, and this is going to be part of our conversation, but I need to do something with it. What do you want me to do with this? This is my cell phone before we get started in conversation.
I want you to turn it off, put it aside, put it someplace where it won't distract you or any of us. And it's a great segue into what I'm going to help share knowledge on today. So, what I like to call is concealed carry with your smartphone. Put it away so people don't know that you have it and you're more approachable that way.
Okay. And I did it. It's out of hands, out of sight. It's somewhere on the floor. Hopefully, it's still working. And so, before we get started in conversation, Tim, introduce yourself to who's ever watching on YouTube real briefly and tell everybody what you are here to talk about.
Yeah, I'm a first-time leader coach. Doesn't mean that I'm doing it for the first time. It's that I coach first-time leaders, and I'm also a professional speaker. And what I help people do is select the right people for leader roles and then help them accelerate their transformation into a first-time leader role, or specifically a people-centered leader role, and without the large number of those that are failing in that particular capacity. There's really three problems that I solve. One is the communication paradox, which I will share with you today. The other one is dysfunctional cultures and first-time leader failure. So if you're any one of those individuals in those particular situations, I can help you.
Well, then let's get started in the conversation. One of the first things that we did was remove the technology, which is often a distraction to any face-to-face conversation. And in planning for this particular conversation, you were telling me, and I want to get this right because I got my notes right in front of me. Our face-to-face people skills, and this is your word, and so I'm going to just throw it back at you, is being eroded. Can you tell me what that means, please?
Yeah, absolutely. First thing, I just want to let all our attendees know that there's no need to take notes. I've done that for you, and I've given Dr. McNally my knowledge guide that he can distribute to you at the end of this particular session. What I will do is I'll help you understand, solve, and prevent what Dr. McNally was alluding to. It's called the communication paradox. Okay. And that's one of the things that I help people understand. And at the end of the session today, you're going to have 4 tips that you can implement immediately, and you don't have to say a word. Sounds counterintuitive because we're sharing knowledge about communication, but these are so powerful. Just to get a little bit ahead of myself, they have to do with body language, and your body language outweighs whatever you say. Okay. Now, the communication paradox, really what that is, that's our 21st century addiction. It has a name. The acronym is FOMO. fear of missing out. Okay. And this is such a problem today. And as Dr. McNally alluded to, it is definitely eroding what used to be our preferred method of communication, which was face to face. That's not the case anymore. It's secondary, almost third to texting and emails. And as Dr. McNally alluded to, this is the culprit for the communication paradox. And the reason is it's in our lifetime, that's this invention, or I should say, this device has got so much included innovation in it that we probably won't see anything like that in our lifetimes. And it literally puts the world at our fingertips, both information-wise and communication-wise. But if you swing the pendulum the other way, to the other side, it creates unhealthy lifestyles, and not to mention it can be deadly. And those are some of the things that I'm going to share with you today so you understand that. This device carries with it so much social and emotional clout that it's not funny. And what I want you to do is I don't want you to respond, but I just want you to just think about this. I want to do just a brief checkup from the neck up about where you might be in terms of this particular addiction in the 21st century. Now, do you, when you go to bed, do you have to have the cell phone, your smartphone right next to you? Do you check that first thing in the morning when you wake up without saying anything to your significant other or your children? Do you feel out of place if it's not right in front of you? You know, these are some of the things that can give you a little bit of a feeling that you have this addiction or some of this addiction. And one thing you can try, and I'll just explain it to you, and I think you're going to already feel why this phone carries so much clout and so emotionally and socially. Next time you're in the mall, you're in the grocery store, walk up to a total stranger, unlock your smartphone, and hand it to them.
What in the world?
Now, how do you feel right now just thinking about that scenario? It probably gives you some funny vibes because literally you would be handing over your life to a total stranger. That's how much emotional and social clout that's carried with the smartphone. Okay, and that smartphone is what I call eroding our most important people skill, which is face-to-face communication. Okay, now this is so fundamental. I want you to truly grasp this. Communication is the foundation of relationships, and relationships are the essence of our existence. Let me repeat that. Communication is the foundation of relationships, and relationships are the essence of our existence.
Can you elaborate a bit on that? Especially the latter part?
Yeah, it really is. If we weren't able to communicate, for example, we wouldn't be able to have this learning session, this series that you developed. We wouldn't be able to raise our children. We wouldn't be able to communicate. It's just, probably the less I say about it, the more it can be comprehended. It's just that you really stop and think. If we could not communicate, it's like you trying to use sign language in a dark room. Doesn't work. Or if you're winking at a cute girl across the room and it's at a totally dark room, doesn't work. Doesn't have the same effect. Okay, so being able to communicate is our fundamental people skill. And I think it's the most important people skill. And I just want to give you a high-level overview of the 3 phases of communication, just to kind of bring it back into perspective. The first one is empathic listening. That's where you're listening to understand, but you're listening from the other person's perspective. And these things that I'm helping with today are much easier said than done. Okay, so it's truly being able to be in the moment, and people have called it a lot of different things: active listening, and sometimes they call it hearing. But hearing is different than listening. Hearing is our a natural sense that we have, that unless you have a hearing problem, hearing just happens. Listening, you've got to engage your cognitive mind and truly listen, but try to listen from the other person's perspective and think of this when you are listening to someone. You want to be laser focused on that person, and you want to listen like a grandparent or a loving guardian. And you know what I mean when you were young and you were talking to that grandparent, that aunt, that favorite uncle, you know how they made you feel because they were focused on you and you could tell that they were truly listening to you. And they were giving you two of your most precious commodities. That's your time and your undivided attention. So that's the first phase. You really truly want to listen to understand, listen to respond. So once you've done that, then the second phase is pausing. Pausing is very powerful. You want to pause and think, and what you're doing is you're demonstrating through body language, although you're not saying anything, you're communicating loudly that I'm pausing and I'm thinking about what it was that you said, as opposed to cutting somebody off or just waiting for them to finish talking so I can talk. Okay, so that's the second phase of that is pausing and thinking. And then the third phase is while you're thinking, prepare your response. Don't just arbitrarily say something, or maybe you heard a trigger word or a trigger phrase and that's all you can think of and that's how you want to respond. Prepare your response and then respond so you can't be misunderstood. So those are really the three phases of or face-to-face communication, which again is being eroded because of the smartphone. Okay. And again, our body language outweighs whatever we say. Because what we do communicates so loudly, doesn't matter what we say. Okay, I've got a short story I want to share with you that brings this home. Now, there was this organization that had problem with their employees. Apparently, they call them slackers. It was getting to be a real problem in the organization. People were slacking off, not doing what they were supposed to do. So this organization went out and hired what they felt was the right individual to come in. This individual had a reputation for, getting rid of slackers and, turning organizations around. So we'll give this individual a name, just a random name. We'll call him Keith. Okay, just a random name. So Keith was on one of his first days in this new capacity as a chief operating officer, and he was part of an entourage that were going around the facility in different areas, just to kind of give Keith an overview of things that were transpiring. So they were in this one area, and Keith looked up and he noticed a young gentleman leaning against a door frame, obviously on his smartphone, not doing anything. So immediately Keith thought, here's a slacker. I'm going to make an example of this individual. So Keith just blurts out, he goes, "Hey," he goes, "what do you," he goes, "how much you make?" And the individual, will call him Tim. Tim is standing there, and Tim's befuddled, got this befuddled look on his face, and looks around and says, $400 a week. So Keith says, "Good, hang on, I'll be right back." So Keith leaves, and you've got this entourage sitting there or standing there in that area of the facility, totally quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Wasn't long, and Keith came back, walked over to Tim. In his mindset, I'm going to fix this guy. He goes, here's $1,600. Here's a month worth of your salary. He goes, "Get out of here and don't come back." So Keith, feeling all proud of himself, comes back over to the entourage, and before they get going, he says, "Anybody got any idea what that slacker used to do here?" Again, dead silent. Just one more. Come on. Somebody's got to know what this slacker did here. And you hear this voice off in the distance, very meek, very crackly. "That was the pizza delivery boy." So the point is, make sure that you understand before trying to be understood. That goes for situations, it goes for conversations. Always be cognizant of understanding so that you can respond intelligently. Now, for example, Keith in that particular situation, Keith did not do that at all. Okay, but the other thing he demonstrated through body language was that he thought he was above everybody else. He was communicating that loudly. He communicated loudly that he's flip it with corporate funds, just give the pizza boy a $1,600 tip. Okay, so that just shows you how important it is to in communication, and how important communication is, and the most important aspect of communication is empathic listening, listening to understand. Okay, now what I've got here, Keith, I've got some simple and impactful solutions I want to share with our listeners today. There's four of them, and
Before you
I've
do
got
that, can I ask you a question?
sure can.
I do appreciate that. So in our kind of prep for this call today, you gave me something, an acronym to think about. And I've been thinking about it for since we've talked. And I've had many conversations with different people since the last time we've talked in
Uh-oh.
preparation for today. And the acronym, well, you gave me the acronym, so you know all about it. And the acronym is WAIT, WAIT. And that was something I really, sat down in this chair that I sit in every day. And I think about that because I have a lot of conversations with people. And to give our audience, those on the call, and for those watching in cyber world, WAIT stands for why am I talking? And that has so many different layers of understanding because in this conversation, just with you alone, it's understanding, bringing your authority to the table so that everybody can understand and appreciate where Timothy Dean Smith is coming from, right? But in many conversations, and especially a conversation that I had yesterday, is what journey do I want to take people through? And so I've kind of transitioned my mindset when I have conversations. It's not just about a conversation because I want to go deeper and I want to build stronger relationships and I want to change the world. And that seems like a really big goal. But I always think about what you said. Why am I talking? What's the journey that I want to take people through? Can you bring us in scope, and especially for today, because we're going to do a lot of talking and a lot of people are going to do a lot of talking today. Can you give us a deeper understanding of that acronym?
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. When that acronym was first introduced to me, I thought, wow, how simple and how appropriate. Why am I talking? And it can mean a couple of different things. It's why am I talking? Maybe because I didn't give it enough thought and truly understand, or why am I talking? Because maybe that's not my area of expertise, and I'm just, saying things that I don't know if it makes sense or not. So it can be looked at from a couple different aspects. But the key to it is it puts the emphasis back towards the listening component. Again, I feel communication is the most important people skill, but I believe the empathic listening is the most important aspect of that skill, because if we tend to listen more, we tend to have shorter conversations, because oftentimes throughout a conversation, the solution or a variation of the solution may come up without you having to interject. And one of the examples I was going to give you, I can give it to you now, is when you're a leader of people, for example, and you're conducting a meeting, and maybe you have a problem that you're defining, okay, and you want the input from that team. One of the greatest quotes or phrases you can use is, after you establish the meeting and why we're here to discuss this particular problem, what do you think? You ask those that you lead, or even a parent to a child, what do you think? That is such a powerful statement. Now, when you do that, go into empathic listening and be quiet and let the conversation go, because we're not scripted. Like today, Keith didn't hand me a script and say, okay, here's what you say and then I say. Our whole life is improvisation. That's why you have to listen, or you're going to come back with some half-baked response or something that doesn't even relate, and people know that you were not truly listening to them. Okay, so the acronym is a good one to think of, not only from the standpoint of why am I talking, maybe meaning too early, I really didn't pause and understand, or why am I talking? This is not something that I am knowledgeable about, that kind of thing. So it's the foundation for what we're doing today, but it's also, again, it's the foundation for relationships, and relationships are the essence of our existence. If we couldn't communicate, we couldn't have relationships, and therefore we probably wouldn't have much of an existence. That's how important communication is, and thank you for bringing that up, Keith. I appreciate that.
So I did that, but I was interrupting a thought that you had earlier. And so I kind of want to give you the opportunity now, with the time that we have left in our conversation, is to leave the audience with those to-do steps, those action items that will make them better communicators.
Listen, and try to, this is not easy. I get calibrated every couple, and I coach people and teach people this stuff. Every so often, my wife will say to me, "You're not listening to me." And so it's something that takes cognitive input and concentration, but try to listen more. And your conversations will be better, they'll be shorter. And I'm not sure how much time I have left, Keith, but there's also empathic listening, what I call round two. And this is a great thing to use for somebody that you're having a conversation with that may be distraught, or a child that's upset about something. The empathic listening round two is, you listen to what they have to say, but then still remain quiet, still in that listening mode, and then you have that awkward silence, and the individual, or if it's an individual in a professional world or a child, they will tend to start off again. And usually that first part of the conversation, they're not really accurate in what they're talking about. They're just speaking emotionally as opposed to thinking about it cognitively. So if you it's an old interview technique, is to be quiet. And a lot of times that round two, when they communicate to you, much more pointed, much more accurate, much less emotions involved in, because they've got the emotional part off their chest. Okay, so that's another thing too, is be a good listener, and don't interrupt people, because that's the impression that you weren't listening to me in the first place. You're just, wanted me to finish, or, you're just listening to my sentence. Okay, so the main thing is, and it's very simplistic but very difficult, listen more, and your life will be a lot better for that.
So with all that, I want everybody in the audience here, and of course on the World Wide Web, where can they find you? And what are you giving to people that will help them change their lives today? And so I know you said earlier in the first part of our call, we're going to give out a handout, and I'm going to give that out after the event's over. How can they get in touch with you?
Well, they've got one stop URL to go to, and that is tdspi.com. That's my initials, Timothy Dean Smith, and the PI is Performance Improvement. tdspi.com. And then when you're there, click on Meet Me, and you'll have a very brief overview of myself to get to know me a little bit. And then click on schedule our get to know each other conversation, so that we can get to know each other a little bit better, and then to see how I can help you along your journey. I've got 4 impactful solutions that I would just like to briefly go through, Keith, if I could, because it's very important.
Please.
Okay, the first one, and these are what I alluded to at the beginning. These are communication solutions to the paradox, but you don't have to speak. You just have to consistently demonstrate them. And I recommend you don't say anything, you just do it, because what will happen over time in your social circles, this will become contagious and you'll see others do it. The first one is more of a physical well-being. There's a thing, an actual condition called tech neck. It's we're developing problems with our neck, our shoulders, our vision, and our cognitive ability. If you just take the smartphone, instead of looking down all the time, when you look at it, just raise it up to eye level. Have it up to eye level. That will help with tech neck. Now, the other one I alluded to is if you can, conceal carry, meaning have your smartphone away so that, especially if you're a leader, that you appear to be more approachable because this has so much clout. Now, if you have this out and somebody approaches you to have a conversation, like Keith did at the beginning of this, make sure that it's off and the person can see you put it away. Don't be theatrical about it. Just make it obvious that, hey, he or she is putting that device out of the way and they're obviously giving me their undivided attention. The third one is if your phone rings while you're having a conversation with somebody, ignore it. Totally ignore it. If they do not say anything about it, they probably know that it's ringing and it's, oh, this person is giving me their undivided attention. If they say, which a lot of people do, well, aren't you going to get that? Just simply say, no, I'm having a conversation with you. That gives you so much credibility and it puts this second to that conversation. And
I
then
love it.
thirdly, this is a universally understood body language expression, smiling. You're communicating joy without saying anything. I consider it a body language hug, okay? And it causes a contagious emotional feeling. Like, for example, I'm looking at Keith right now on the screen, and you can see him, and he's smiling. He just got
But
it.
you're not looking at me anymore. You're looking
See,
at whatever my picture is.
yeah, and see how contagious that was. And I'm sure I know there's a few others I see where they're getting contagious. So use that whenever you can. It's a sincere form of communication, and it's so powerful. I've got some bonus tips, just a few bonus tips.
You can only give one. Your time's running up.
I'll give one. Okay. Uh, when approaching someone, try this phrase instead of this phrase. What I mean is, instead of saying, hey, Keith, I need to talk to you, which kind of is understood, well, he wants to talk at me. Okay. Try, do you have time for a conversation? Much much better approach, and it alludes to, hey, he wants to have a conversation, meaning back and forth, as opposed to, I need to talk to you. Okay, that is absolutely great. And then the last one I'm going to leave you with, Keith, and this is I'm using this, but it's an example, is a power thank you. It's not just thanks or thank you. It's thank you, name, and why. Thank you, Keith. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my knowledge and insight with your audience, and I hope that they can improve from that. Okay? If you don't know somebody's name, ask them. And if you're out and about and people have name tags on, the name tag is not for their benefit, it's for our benefit. So use their name. Thank you, Keith. Really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Timothy Dean Smith, I appreciate you being on the call and having a conversation with me. Thank you so much. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. And I think you got some thumbs up and applause and some smiles with all of that. So good for you.
All right.
All right. Next, Cheyenne, are you ready to have a conversation? Because, oh my goodness, Cheyenne, I have to flip my card over because you're on this side. Um,
Okay.
oh, and don't worry about it, Eileen, you're all the way over here, so that's good. Um, to kind of get this conversation started, Shane, I want to bring to our audience's attention a story that I only know in brief. No, it's not the guitar story. So that's an entirely different story. When we were prepping for this call, when we were prepping for this conversation, you were telling me about, and I forget where, I think it may have been in Kentucky, some small town, some town that get overrun with drug dealers. And I was like flabbergasted by this story. And because this is kind of leading into what we're going to talk about a bit. And it took some specific incidences that some of the youth in the area got hooked on meth or whatever, the drug of choice was. But from that, the people in the community started getting fed up with the situation. It was at the community level, it was at the people level that said, hey, enough is enough is enough. And they quite literally, according to my memory, and you're telling the story, they marched through the streets of this city, this town, to get rid of. And I was kind of scared because drug dealers typically carry guns. And so, no, but the victory was at hand because it wasn't just about one person making a decision to do something, it was about one person motivating a group of people to get stuff done. And now, to prep for this conversation, this is your problem statement. You ready? This is how I know it. Too many people are sitting on the bleachers. Cheyenne Kramer, tell us who you are and what brings you to the conversation today, please.
Oh, thank you so much, Keith. And thank you for reminding me of all these pieces that were in our conversation, because yes, that is exactly where I sit. My husband and I are full-time RVers. We're traveling mostly the eastern half of the United States right now, looking for communities who are ready to get off the bleachers and onto the playing field to create change, very much like what you're doing here right now, Keith. We appreciate all the effort that you're putting out to bring together groups of people, teams of people, just like the people who are here today, because there is so much power in bringing people together, in developing community, whether it's online or whether it's live. And yes, your memory serves you well. It was actually in Clay County, Kentucky. And it was one person who actually got a group of churches to come together and say, we're going to take back our town. And, it was a rainy day when they had decided they were going to do this march. The organizers were afraid nobody was going to show up. It was unheard of for a group of churches to come together. And oh my God, 4,300 people showed up in the streets that day and said, we're taking our town back. So, that's a big part of what we're all about, and why we're on the road looking for places, looking for projects where we can bring together the power of a group, the power of a team. Napoleon Hill spoke a lot about the power of a mastermind and how new ideas can come out of a mastermind. It doesn't matter whether you're talking from a brain kind of situation, like what he might have spoken about, bringing together everybody's brains and thoughts to create that mastermind, or whether you look to something like the Bible. It says, wherever two or more are, and they're there in my name, I'm there too. So, the thing is that town was transformed that day, where more and more people came together and more of the corruption was being revealed. And that's the power that we have when we come together. That is the drum that I'm beating wholeheartedly everywhere I go. Some of the work that we do under We Care Partnerships Network, we're looking and we're partnered with Rick Mabe here with the Hope Institute, because we want to build communities that are all about that as well. So if you have people living in a community and thinking about, first of all, it's about connecting to your own gifts and talents, being aware of, do I have a passion? Do I have a mission? Do I have a cause? And if I do, what kind of gifts and talents have I developed to be able to bring to that cause? It's a huge component that needs to happen first. And when we go out there and start working in communities, and we've had the opportunity to work with a group in Raleigh, North Carolina. We had an opportunity to work with a group out in Western North Carolina. Two very different kinds of causes that emerged out of those groups. But in both cases, people connected with what was important to them. We reorganized groups so that the people who had a common passion mission, cause, we put them together, and then we get them brainstorming about what can they do with their collective gifts to be able to focus in on making a difference in that cause, mission, or purpose that they feel so heartfelt about. So that's the big picture in terms of what we've got going on. So I'm going to question why am I talking right now and see if you have another question for me.
So, why are you talking? Why are we having this conversation? Because the power here that I always come back to is if we're going to make change happen, we need to make it happen together. And so, really, there's got to be some secret to all of that. And that's why I always I come back to you and I come back to Eileen for an entirely different reason. But the two of you are power people in my life that says, um, we can do this. We just need to figure out how it's going to get done. And so, how do you and your husband and partnership with Rick here, how do you actually make change happen? That's kind of the secret sauce to a lot of things because a lot of people want to and know that there's aches and pains in their lives, but too many, it's so easy, Shan, it's too easy to sit on the bleachers. It's too easy to say somebody else is going to take care of it.
It is. It's far too easy. And too many of us, kind of like Tim was alluding to, too many of us have become addicted to this. And so we don't have even time. We don't make the time to think about these things. And, my training in a lot of this came straight out of corporate America. And that's where I learned that a lot of times the challenges that are going on, whether it's with individuals or an organization as a whole, a lot of the answers for how to solve those problems are best found closer to the problems. So, if we go out into the community where we are and, people are talking about, the problems of homelessness and all of this, it's like, well, let's talk about it with those who know what's going on. You've done this very well in terms of being able to find people who have been touched in some way, shape, or form by suicide. So those are the folks that once they've been touched by it, whether it was themselves, a family member, or a friend, those are the people who start to really dig and go, why did this happen? What can we do, either myself or collectively, to try to prevent these kinds of things from happening? And, and our heart and soul gets into it because our emotions were touched by it in some shape or form. So in corporate America, we'd go into a department. I went into, this was a long time ago, I went into a company that put together, this was so crazy. They put together a pay for skills program, told their employees that, hey, y'all can you can get paid more on an hourly basis by being able to go to that department or that department and be able to learn, how to do the work in that department. So now it becomes more flexible. We can put you in different places. And they announced this without having a training program in place for people to be able to learn those other skills. And I got brought in because all these people in the shop floor community were mad as hornets, and rightfully so. And so I told the management, I said, you want the training program? You've got to go where the people know what needs to be done. You've got to have your shop floor employees involved in helping to create training, the certification program. These solutions have to come from the bottom up, because when everybody's trying to do top down, usually the people up at the top don't understand what's going on at the bottom as well as the people at the bottom. So I spent 6 months there facilitating teams in all these different departments. They created their own training program, their own certification program, and there were managers who couldn't believe it. They told me when I started that I'd never get training programs out of those departments because it was the troublemakers who had signed up to be part of those teams. Well, guess what? Those troublemakers just wanted to be heard. just like
Mm.
Tim was talking about. They wanted somebody to hear them and to understand where they were and what was going on in those departments. I became that listener and the facilitator to help them create the change. And the thing is, and we've seen it, Western North Carolina still has groups of people. There are people who are working on ways that they can impact the education system, ways they can impact getting, helping more people develop a spiritual connection. There's people who are out there, doing different things to look at even, oh my God, the political system. So that's where their passions and missions were, and they wanted to do more there. Back in Raleigh, North Carolina, we had groups of people who were coming together and saying, well, I have this knowledge. I could be helping seniors as part of this seniors team. I've got this tool or knowledge. I'm going to help youth. I'm going to help, women's issues. And so those teams came together based on what people were feeling in their hearts. And once they've got connected and they've kind of put things on the table in terms of what are some of the skills, gifts, talents that I have to bring, now it's just about brainstorming and saying, okay, so what kind of problems do we see in this community or in this department or in this group of people that we can help to solve?
Mm.
Brainstorming, getting people to throw those ideas on the table, bringing people together around those ideas and brainstorming for new solutions. I call myself a super puzzle builder. That's what I love to do. So I go and I look for all these people who have all these amazing specialties, and I put them together in a super puzzle so that we can create new solutions made up of all these different puzzle pieces. That's where the power really starts to come together, and we can create change at a level that most people have not yet seen.
I don't even know how to follow up with that, but I'm going to go back to something that you said earlier because we start making changes because something has hit us personally. And usually we didn't have an emotional investment in seeing change happen. So this begs the question, what's happened in your life that you are so empowered to see something different happen in local communities, in the state, maybe in the world?
Wow.
Tell us about
There was
you.
real there's really a series of things that have provided the motivation for me to be a change maker. And it's funny because when I was young, oh my God, I didn't want to change anything in my world. I was a status quo holder in a big way. So it's really kind of funny that I've kind of been pushed into this evolution. But it started in high school with watching friends of mine commit suicide. I was did a valedictory speech on following your heart because it became real clear to me really fast in life that there were too many people who were being pushed to follow the money trail in their careers and they were being rejected. It was like, no, whatever you're feeling here that you should be doing, that's not realistic. You shouldn't do that.
Mm.
So a lot of what I do is standing very tall for the whole idea that we should be able to connect our heads and our hearts and build an income around that. That we should be able to design our life and figure out how our careers fit around that instead of trying to fit our life into the cracks around our career. And, I got laid off twice from corporate America in less than a year and said, done that, not doing it anymore, going down the entrepreneurial path, finding new ways to do things and just but grateful for the corporate experience because of what I learned there. And then the one that really became a huge part of my life, and my husband's life especially, he had this insane idea. At the time it felt insane, that he needed to run for governor of North Carolina as an independent candidate. And that's when we came face to face with the belly of the beast. And we saw how corrupt everything internally was that was being run. And, I came to understand that the reason my husband decided to do that was because he said, hey, If I'm not willing to step out here and at least try to be part of a solution, then I'm part of the problem.
Hmm.
And once we began to see what was internally really going on there and how change within the system was almost sounded impossible in some ways, we said, well, then it's time to build new systems. And that's truly what we're about. That's why I call myself a community and economic development specialist, because we're building systems as we're out here on the road that's designed to help more people connect their head and their heart, figure out how to build an income around it, and make an impact in the world, and building the new communities that can make that all happen.
Well, that sounds like a big endeavor. And that even
It
sounds
is.
scary to me when I try to think about that, because in the past 2 years, developing the Envision speaker series wasn't even something that I was contemplating to this scale. And yet here it is, bringing people together, such as yourself and everybody that we see here at the virtual table, to hopefully, and not just hopefully anymore, I actually want to do it. I actually want to see change happen. And the only way I know how to add value to that is to bring people who are experts in making change happen and making that impact, all of you here. And afternoon, we're going to have some more people join us on the call. But you talked specifically about systems. How do systems really apply to making change happen? Now I'm curious.
Well, it's the systems that we live in, that we've been brought up in, that have so many people kind of locked. We used to talk about the golden handcuffs that people had in corporate America. There's so many other systems that are creating those golden handcuffs. I mean, I've volunteered in high schools where there's so many of our young people who are yearning to have somebody teach them about how to build their own business. So many of them want to be their own boss. One of the reasons we have so many people in our prison systems, and I've taught in prisons, so I know this is true, is because our school systems refuse to teach them how to be their own boss. They want them to be employees for somebody else. And so a lot of the people who are trapped in our prison systems right now, they got mad because they weren't learning what they wanted to learn. They went to the streets and they learned from the wrong people. That's why we have so many drug dealers out here. That's why that town in Kentucky was such an incredible story, that they managed to overcome that. So, there's so many of our systems that we have identified that are just plain broken. So that's why, if system isn't going to teach our young people about entrepreneurship, then my husband and I are going to do it, and we do it frequently. If the system's not going to teach us about finding a balance between healthcare that is created by man and healthcare that is created by nature, then my husband and I are going to teach people about that. If the system's not even going to teach people how to have control over their finances, then we're going to put together teams of people who are going to teach people about that. That's what I mean when I say the systems are broke, and we're putting together multiple teams. And this, you saw some things on LinkedIn yesterday I put out there. I am building teams of people who can be counted on to be the people to launch these new systems, because that's the only way we're going to find health, wealth, and peace, not only in our country, but around the world. And, I'm just crazy enough to say, I'm going to keep working at it. And I know that I will find the people to help us do it.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that specifically, but you are going to tell me how that's going to work in 2024. What are we planning? What are you planning? What are we doing this year?
Ooh. I think it seems like there's a theme that's wanting to evolve this year heavily around the idea of lifting up our youth. This is one of the things you and I have talked about quite a bit, and it is a big concern to me that too many of our youth at this time are extremely depressed, considering suicide, those kinds of things. So we're putting a lot of energy in that direction to help lift up our youth for sure. But we're also going back to 20 years ago, we started with the whole idea of having teams of independent consultants that could be counted upon to be able to go in and create change in business. And so that's the other piece that I'm focusing on in a big way right now is finding individual consultants or teams of consultants to become part of what I call Universal Solution Alliance, where we're all about putting heart and soul back into business. And whether it's heart and soul with solo entrepreneurs that learn how to become social impact entrepreneurs, or whether it's bigger businesses that need teams of people who can help get back to
All right, bring her back. Come
us
on.
understanding that humans are what creates success to the streets
All right.
when it's convenient.
All
So
right. Well, we
those are the
lost
things
all
we're
that.
working
Say,
on this
wait,
year.
Cheyenne. We lost 30 seconds of that because of some internet issues.
Oh no.
So come back in 30 seconds. Go back 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Oh,
Rewind.
yeah, it's hard to.
That's okay.
Um,
We're making change happen through solopreneurs who want to make an impact in local communities. So again,
yes,
and
social impact,
you use
entrepreneurs, but also going into larger companies with teams of consultants who are ready to understand that they've got to be concerned about the human element in business again.
okay. And that apparently is something that's been lost because you are very clearly using the word soul, SOUL, as in heart and soul. Yes?
That's it. That's it. Absolutely. So yeah, Um, I like the term human centric. We're all about becoming more human centric in business again, because there's too many people who, let's talk about emotions. That's a big piece of it, right? Leave your emotions at the door. Well, emotions is what makes us human. So we've got to be able to learn how to help people with emotional intelligence instead of telling them they're not supposed to have emotions. That's just insane. And it's killing our companies. And our smaller or our younger generations refuse to work in an environment that doesn't consider the human element. So either these big businesses are going to change or they're going to collapse. I'm here to help promote the change.
Well, I know you're getting a lot of support from Timothy Dean Smith. Tim, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I got a question. Actually, I want to give you something I thought of, and I think like I don't have a box, so I'm always thinking like this. But you mentioned lifting up our youth. If you just altered that phrase a little bit and say listening up our youth to truly make it that you are listening, and that's where the power is in the listen. If people would just truly listen to them, and you're going to be way ahead of the game. And one other thing that you talked about, the example of the people that were approached in the organization that built whatever it was, that once you give people ownership of something like that, they're going to do way better than you even thought because they're functioning where the rubber meets the road, and that's why it's so powerful. And then the other thing is, leader needs to set that environment up and get out of the way, let them go. So try that. Try listening up our youth as opposed to lifting them up.
That's awesome.
It's
Thank you,
more
Tim.
pointed. It's just more pointed. I'm a words guy.
I love
Tim,
it.
I
Thank you.
appreciate that. Brenda, your camera's off, but your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to say you're spot on, both of you, Tim and Cheyenne, that, I'm going to talk about it later, but there is so much that we can do in education, and that's what my book is all about. And I just want to applaud your efforts, Cheyenne and Tim, you both, that listening is a huge part of what we need to do. And there's so much that we need to do for our youth. So I'm behind both of you 100% in what you're saying. And I want to echo that I just did yesterday a recording for principals on teaching them about empathy. So I want to tell you that the change is happening because I'm working with the Illinois Principals Association, and we're pushing that about listening to and our staff and our students and our parents and our community. I'm pushing that, and that you do have to have the empathy in what you're doing in your leadership. There is nothing wrong with that. Leading with your heart is absolutely what you need to do. And I made that statement to a couple of publishers yesterday and a couple of authors in business, is that we have to treat people as humans. We absolutely have to do that because that's where we have to meet people. We have been through so much in the last few years that's brought that to our attention, and we have to address that. So kudos to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
Cheyenne, you got 2 more minutes. Give us give us something that we can do today, that people can do today, that will
Hmm.
put them in the right direction. Or as a
I
change
love
maker, as an impact maker, as a soul and heart entrepreneur.
it. I can do that. You know, the simplest way for people to become a social impact entrepreneur is to ask yourself one question. And that question is, what are some of the biggest challenges I've been through in my life where I have learned something? I have gone over, around, and through something, and I have gained wisdom that I could be sharing with other people. That is one of the biggest things right now that anybody can do, because our world needs more hope. It wants more hope. And the more that people write a book about their story, do seminars or discussions like this where they can share that wisdom that they've gained, where they can give other people hope for their future, is absolutely one of the most valuable things that anybody can do. And we all have a story. And, thank God for the question guy, because you're out here giving people an opportunity to tell their stories. That's where hope comes from. And you can build, classes, seminars, write books. Those are all entrepreneurial activities that can be done out of the wisdom you've gained and you should be sharing with the world. So that's how people can easily get off the bleachers and onto the playing field and help make a difference in the world.
If I didn't know it any better, I'm thinking that you were talking right to me, but you're talking into the camera, so it's everybody who's listening. So I fully appreciate that. Shane, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up next, I have Eileen, Mitch, and Kevin, but I need some water first, and so give me a minute. Um, but get ready to talk. Eileen, Kevin,
Yes.
Mitch, Howard, Mitch, where are you at? See, I know it. I know it. I know it. He can't even find the mute button now. He can't find the camera button.
You're ahead of schedule, man. All right, I need the next cup of
All
coffee.
right.
I got 15 minutes to go make coffee.
You got 2 minutes. I gave you to 11 o'clock.
Okay, I'm going to make coffee. Let's go.
How are y'all doing today?
Good.
Oh, wait.
Great.
Brenda, you still have your hand up. Are you still asking a question? Or do you need, or no? I think, or that might have been from earlier. I don't want to interrupt Brenda if she's got a question. All right, Brenda has disappeared. All right, we're up. Kevin, Mitch, Eileen, welcome to the
Good
Envision
morning.
Speaker. Good morning. How are you doing? Welcome to the Envision Speaker Series. Wow. January event. And so, like I said, I do have notes, and I want to make sure I get this started right because I'm always going back to what Kevin's wisdom is telling me, and I don't always pick it up right at the time he's telling me, so I have to think about it some more. But in our previous conversation, or in a conversation that we've had, I think with the three of you, you mentioned this, Kevin, and I quoted it, and then I had to go figure out because it was a quote from somebody else. The opposite of addiction is connection. And I think the person who said that was Johan Hari.
Hari.
Hari?
Johan Hari.
Johan Hari. And so I had to go dig that up a bit because outside of you ever telling me that, that is not something that I'm like into, like I'm not in that space. But so when I did some looking into that, it was making some sense. And so an addiction, we typically, somebody's drug addicted, but easily you could be addicted to power. You could be addicted to whatever. And I think there was a time when you said you were addicted to endurance sports. That was your thing. I don't know if it was an addiction, but definitely anybody who's doing those kind of an addiction to the phone. And I can't touch mine, Tim, because it's on the floor. You told me to throw it. Well, I didn't throw it out, but it's on the floor. Um, Addiction puts us in isolation, and that's the opposite of what we want. And so we want to provide help, hope, and healing to people. And what we're going to learn today from the conversation with you, Eileen and Mitch, and in the conversation I'm going to have in the afternoon with three other ladies, we have to do this as a team. So welcome, Eileen, Kevin, Mitch, welcome to the call. Welcome to the conversation. Please introduce yourselves to each other, to everybody, to our YouTube audience, and let's dive into this conversation. I don't care who goes first.
Eileen should go first.
Okay,
Go
Eileen, you go first.
Okay. I'm Eileen Bild. I'm CEO of Hotel Universe and Ordinary to Extraordinary Life. And we have a platform for people to have a voice, to be seen, to be heard. And it's for people's life legacy, for them to be able to show up in life as their authentic self and to become the best version of themselves, which actually encompasses so far what Cheyenne and Timothy have brought to the table of this speaker series. And I look forward to being able to share with Kevin and Mitch with what we have to talk about.
Cool.
Mitch, you go.
Yeah, Kevin's pulling up the, all right.
Kevin and I will wait each other out, won't we? I'm Mitch Gray. I am a guy who writes books, gives keynote inspirational talks. I'm a spiritual guide, and I help leaders develop better skills for leading well and bringing the art of humanity back to leadership. I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you.
That was so nice and succinct, Mitch. I love that.
I've practiced.
So my ultimate goal here is on this planet is to try and make life easier and happier for as many people as possible, including myself. And it was brought up a little bit earlier. How many people don't feel seen and heard in their own home? They feel lonely even when they live under the same roof with other people. They feel lonely in a two-person relationship. And that causes a lot of pain. And what I've noticed for a long time now is that so much of our stress and unhappiness is coming from our poor relationships. So in order to help prevent this, in order to help remedy this, I created the Uchi app, which you can see right here, the logo. But Uchi is a social platform. It is not a social media, and it helps people connect on that deeper level. And it uses only the written word. And what's so powerful is when you have time to write and everything slows down, you have a chance to share your perspective and truly be heard by the people that matter most to you. So that's really what I'm going after, is helping to connect people. I use the app to do it. There's lots of other ways to do it. And when we feel connected, we feel happy, and we don't have to compensate for the pain of not feeling connected through our behaviors, through addiction, through depression, through our smartphones, and so many other behaviors that are really just our attempt at trying to ease our pain of not feeling that love and connection. So that's really what I'm all about.
Well, Kevin, then I appreciate that. So let's talk about that. We're going to build connections today, and that's kind of part of what the Envision Speaker Series is all about, is to make change, but we make change happen together. And so in order for change to happen together, we need to know, like, and trust, and that's kind of like a social media thing. But going a bit deeper, that means we need to become authentic, vulnerable, and and I like the word that Eileen teaches me, we have to learn how to validate ourselves and each other. So let's build connections. How are the two out of the three of you, how do we make this happen? Where do we want to start this conversation?
I'll be happy to start.
Please.
Because I think communication is like the overarching that has been presented so far. And um, Kevin and Mitch, I believe, also including myself, it all is about that connection, that communication, the understanding, the listening that Timothy talked about, the all the great things. Cheyenne said so much. I can't like pinpoint one thing, but Cheyenne shared so many great aspects of what she does. And anything that I've learned over the years, I would say, working with people independently and in groups, is our way of communicating is so key in order to be heard, valued, understood, or to feel heard, valued, understood, and to have a strong sense of self autonomy and authenticity. And I'm going to just throw out there um, something that people don't really consider and think about, and that is in our younger years, we don't typically fully develop our autonomy stage. So as adults, we're constantly looking to be heard, to be valued, because we did not achieve that in our development stages. And it kind of goes to what Cheyenne was saying, and that children are being told how to be, who to be, what to do, where to go. And so that part of them is stifled to feel like they can show up in the world authentically themselves and not be told there's something wrong with them because you're not going into the corporate world, you're not doing the right thing. And I would like to say that what you're presenting here today, Keith, is the opportunity for people to listen to what each of us are saying. And as a whole, there's an opportunity for change to occur individually and in group and in the corporate world. But change is important and imperative if we're going to sustain and survive as a human race, with the idea that we can have healthy communication, that we feel that connection as Kevin speaks about, and that people can wake up in the morning and live life to the fullest, not be afraid, not feel like they're not valued and validated. So I would like to just throw out another three words that I call the three C's, which is confidence, courage, and clarity. If we don't have confidence, then we don't have the courage to speak up for ourselves, and therefore we don't have the clarity of who we are and how we want to communicate, how we want to make that connection, and how we want to teach other people to treat us.
Eileen, thank you. And so, although that's a good start to the conversation, Mitch, Kevin, this is all about the three of you. How are we going to build a world where we feel better about sharing ourselves?
Oh, I'll go next. We're hearing this word communication a lot today, and it's a really important word, but I think there's something deeper actually going on. And it's more about connection than communication. Connection is the goal of the communication. So we may not be communicating very well, and in not communicating well, we don't connect. Everything is really boiling down to connection, which is what we talk about, this togetherness that humans need. Humans are social creatures. We need each other. It is a basic human need. So if we don't actually, we can communicate all day long. We're communicating right now. Are we connecting? I don't know, maybe in a way, but it's hard to develop a really deep connection in an hour, in 4 hours, in a day, in a week. Connection takes time, it takes trust, it takes intention, it takes effort. And if we think there's going to be a quick fix by, going to a workshop on communication, it's not going to work. You have to practice it, you have to live it, you have to do it well, which is what, Eileen is the big promoter of validating, which is a way that we communicate so that the other person feels heard and understood. And when we feel heard and understood, then we feel valued. And when we feel valued, we feel loved. And that helps reinforce the connection. And when we feel connected and loved, our behaviors change, they improve. And that's where the addiction and depression and suicide and gun violence and all these problems that the kids are having, that the adults are having, that humanity is having, are just symptoms. The behaviors are just the symptoms. So I think it's just important. That was a whole lot in there, but I think it's really important that, we can communicate with our spouses and our kids about what homework do you have to do? What test are you studying for? What's your next school project? Did you pick up the laundry, at the dry cleaner? Did you get the milk? Did you buy, the shovel because it's going to be a snowstorm? That's communicating. We can communicate, but we don't connect. We feel lonely in a relationship of two people, as I said earlier. We feel lonely in a house full of people. We try to have a physical connection to achieve an emotional connection. And how often does that work? Now you have sexaholics, right? Or we try to be together in a room, through the COVID pandemic, but just being together doesn't mean you're connecting on that emotional level. So I think that's really an important distinction to understand. And it goes back to what you started with, Keith, what Johann Hari found out that the opposite of addiction is connection, and the opposite of depression is connection, and the opposite of suicide is connection, and the opposite of power and narcissism is connection. These are all ways that we try to compensate for not having connection.
Mitch, before I go on, do you want to add to that part?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's another kind of one line saying that is the opposite of depression is play. And I would offer that the reason someone came up with that, to Kevin's point, is when you play, when you go back to beginner's mind, there is a deeper connection that naturally takes place. When you watch two little children play a game together, they are connected and they get over their grievances really quickly and they get over their problems really quickly. But as adults, we lose the sense of play. And that takes courage as an adult, right? To play, to have fun, to enjoy, I remember years ago I had a job and I literally got written up for laughing too much in the office. I got written up twice for laughing too much in the office. It was a government job, so that explains part of it. But it's really interesting, going back to what Eileen said, we're born into these giftings, religious belief systems, cultural belief systems. My dad used to hate eating salads and he called it rabbit food. And so what did Mitch not enjoy eating as an adult? Salads, because I was told it was for rabbits and we don't eat salads. We eat meat and we eat potatoes because that's what we do in the South. We eat fried stuff. And so you're gifted all of this stuff that Don Miguel Ruiz so sequently calls poison. And all of this poison is spewed upon us as children. And all of a sudden, as adults, we begin realizing not only am I not connected to anyone else, but I'm not connected to self. And that's really where all of this begins. I actually believe that I can't be connected to anyone else until I'm connected with self, truly and sincerely. And so now we're doing the work of learning to connect with self so that I have any water in the well to be connected to anyone else. And that becomes a real challenge. It's like the old adage, love your neighbor as yourself. I can't love my neighbor if I don't love myself. Now, I can learn in that practice of connecting and learning with others and loving others, I can learn to love self and connect with self. But if I'm not connected to self, then who can I be connected to? And that gets to be a real issue. And when we talk about isolation and silos and technology, et cetera, that's really what we see happening, right? It's the isolation of the worldwide opportunity that even though we have all of this at our disposal and our fingertips, we really often have nothing. And that becomes the great challenge and the great poison.
Before you go on, and before I even ask any other question or make a comment, I do see a hand raised. And so either Kevin has something to add or he's got a challenge. And so either way, it's good because we're here to learn from one another. Kevin, what you got?
Well, first of all, Mitch, I've also gotten in trouble for laughing and having too much fun at work. I was told that if I'm laughing, then I'm not working. Meanwhile, I'm coming up with billion-dollar patent inventions, so like, don't tell me that laughing is not about connecting. And I totally agree with play, and play is just another tool to achieve connection. Again, the ultimate goal is connection and love and belonging. And I'll just use those words interchangeably today, but I'm talking about, all three of those. I will challenge you, though, on the self-love. So we've been hearing this for decades that you have to love yourself before you can love anyone else. Everybody knows that, right? It's all like that's a given, but it's not true, actually. How many one-year-olds practice self-love? How many three-year-olds practice self-love? You can't love yourself when you're not even self-aware. And self-awareness doesn't even come into the picture until you're like 6 or 7 years old. I mean, that's shown in the neuroscience and all. So while I'm a big fan of self-love, absolutely, we have to first learn what healthy love feels like. If we don't first learn what healthy love feels like, most likely from our parents, if we don't learn what it feels like to receive love, then we are going to struggle to give it to others and to give it to ourselves from that point on. And I think this is why the self-help industry is such a challenge and struggle. And I'm just going to say it's a failure. There's so many books out there, and it's $1 billion industry. And another book, another workshop, another lesson plan. We're still missing the fundamental point that we haven't learned what it feels like first to receive love. And we got to get it, from our parents or teachers or somebody, some adult, some credible person in our life. We need to feel that love before we know how to give it. And that's giving it to others and to ourselves. The caveat that I'll share on top of that is once we become adults, teenagers, adults, self-aware, we can practice self-love and loving others at the same time. But if we don't learn it first, it's going to be a challenge for the rest of our lives.
Before anybody goes forward, I want to say, Kevin, thank you. I know who somebody is in this space. Brenda, you're kind of in this space because you've been in the school system for a long time. And so you have firsthand experience. You could turn yourself on, your microphone on. I want some insights from you. Not your camera. Get your buttons right. Camera on, microphone on. Brenda,
Hang on.
let me know when you're here.
Everybody is spot on in regards to when we're talking about love of self. And you're right.
Brenda, all right.
The things that I feel and I stress so much is in my two rules about the very first thing that we do in two rules is building those positive relationships at school with our students and building that trust. Trust is the very first thing you have to do. And one of the very first things in two rules is helping children to start that process of asking the question, is this going to make me feel good? Is this going to make others feel good? Is this going to make me feel safe? Is this going to make others feel safe? It's a really a simplistic approach, but it's the first time that it takes the opportunity for kids to really think about themselves and others and going through that process. And we talk about that and really asking the questions about what does it really look like to me to feel good and to feel safe. I know that Cheyenne, you're taking on that whole gamut of trying to fix systems, and I think that you're spot on because so many systems are broken But I want to say, I'll just make this statement. This is what I was going to say later, but I'll make it now because I feel like it's so important to make it now. Society is a reflection of what we, parents, education, community, has allowed to happen. And the only way we will find a solution to our problems that we see is when we decide parents, school, and community work together. Together, we can. Separately, we cannot. I hope that helps. That answered what you wanted me to say, Keith.
It does because again, we're looking at the fact that Kevin just said that we have to learn how to love from people around us because don't innately have that. And so I know from the fact that you and Natalie have been on the Envision Speaker series that she may have only felt loved, appreciated, validated because you took the effort to give her that. And so that's outside the scope of this particular conversation, but you were the parent in that situation. You were a school administrator at the time, but this young lady in her middle school was hurting. And quite frankly, for the sake of everybody's content, she was being abused at home. And so Brenda kind of stepped in and through a journaling effort and just through intentionality, Brenda gave this girl hope, life, and she taught her how to love herself. At least I hope so. And through over the years, now this young lady is a young adult, and she will always be in a process of recovery and healing from whatever all the trauma that she's experienced as a young lady, but still, she's a survivor and she's thriving. And I always say this because she actually says it in the call. I'm living my best life now. And that's perfect for her because, Brenda, you validated her in her space. And that was so important for her to hear. Not discounting anything Mitch said. Now we have to approach what does it mean? How do I understand how to love myself? And we're going to get into more of that in the second half of this call, towards the last conversation I'm going to have, because three ladies are going to come in the call and tell us how to do that. Because I'm not even sure I'd even know how to do that, because sometimes it's just really frustrating. How do I love myself? And what does that look like? So, can we talk about that? What does love of self actually do and should look like? Eileen?
So ask me the question again.
What does it look like if I were to say I love myself? Now, I've been told that I'm a ray of sunshine, and I'll share that conversation while it's on my YouTube channel. So somebody saw something valid in me and say, Keith, you're doing pretty good. And it felt good. And I think at that point, I'm thinking I need to take a look at myself differently and appreciate who I am as a person. And then that allows me to better appreciate all the conversations that I'm having. Thus, all of you are here in my presence. And so I am grateful and appreciative. Eileen, what does self love look like?
So self-love to me is the elimination of judgment of the self, judgment of others, comparing oneself to others, comparing to what is expected of us. And it's standing in self-empowerment, feeling empowered to speak your truth, to say what you really want to say without the fear of what somebody else is going to react or respond to, how you're presenting, what's important to you, your values. Self-love is knowing what your love language is. And if you know what your personal love language is, then you can teach others what's important to you. And in order to have that connection, as Kevin has talked about, we've got to know what connects us to the world outside of us and starting from within. So it's looking from within outward first versus outward in and trying to fit what's coming into us, because when people overstep our boundaries, what we will not accept, and if we are a yes person and we can say no, then after an experience, we may feel deflated, walked all over, not heard, not understood, disappointed, upset, angry. So there's a lot of people walking around the world today angry, and they're angry because they don't have that self-love. They don't love themselves enough to be okay to stand in their self-empowerment and to have an experience with someone else, um, and be okay that that person may not like what you say to them. And if a person doesn't like what you say to them, then a lot of the times that means that they don't have self-love, and they want you to follow in their footsteps and what they're saying and what their belief systems are, what their values are. So there's a lot of division in the world right now, a lot of chaos, a lot of people afraid to speak up because there's the cancel culture. And so it diminishes a person's sense of self-worth. Am I worthy? You know, if I try to talk to someone about what's important to me and they brush it off, or they don't, tell me that it's okay to be who I am, then I don't feel like I belong. And it goes in this cycle, in this circle of um, inclusive of psychology, of neuroscience, and there's a lot of layers and pieces of who we are as humans. When we take in all that information and how we digest it within ourselves, if we don't have a strong sense of self-love, it's going to possibly tear us apart. And then we spend a lot of time wanting people to love us, wanting people to hear us, and wanting to feel valued. Does that make sense?
It does. And so from my own personal journey, and so all of you know this story from one point or from pieces of it. I made my second suicide attempt in 2021. And so there's one person on the call here that saved me. I wouldn't be sitting here, Mitch Gray, if it wasn't for you. And so it was because of him. He taught me in his own special way, of course, how to love myself, and meaning that how to find value in who I am, how to find purpose in who I am. And he simply gave me two things to do. So, Brendan, not necessarily your two rules, but two rules to follow every day. Breathe, find a way to breathe, and then get your ass out of bed. And for those of you who don't appreciate that, basically he said show up. So every day I decided to do two things: breathe and show up. And so with that, and from that, I started having conversations with people in order to, Kevin, connect and find a way, a reason, and a purpose for me to live each day, because it wasn't easy. Um, that 2021 sucked, basically, for my life. And so it was a slow evolution. And then I've met all of you through one person or another, or through intentionality. And it was having those conversations that I learned that I'm okay, that my thoughts are valid, that my emotions are valid, that what I have to say is important. And I learned to appreciate and love myself for who I am. And I'm 54 now. And so we're talking 3 years ago that, my life imploded. And here I am now, with a great group of friends, connections, people who appreciate, and I appreciate them. So it's not an easy journey to take. But yeah, absolutely. Eileen, all of that is valuable. Brenda, it looks like you were about to jump in with something, and I may have just read your body language wrong.
No, you didn't. I wanted to go back to what Mitch said about having a hard time, some, loving other people before you love yourself. And I thank Mitch for having that impact on you, Keith, because um, he's right. And I wanted to ask Mitch his opinion, going back to what Timothy was talking about with social media and those phones that we're so tied to. And going back to the youth that we do have an increase, unfortunately, and it's been going on for quite some time with our youth and suicides and wellness overall. And I wanted to validate what Mitch was saying about that. In order for us to be able to love and care for other people, we have to be able to love ourselves first. And it's very difficult for our youth right now, I feel, because it's going back to what Eileen was talking about, judgment. Social media impacts our youth so much because they are looking at social media constantly, and they're judging themselves based on what they're seeing, how many likes they're getting, if they're getting reposted, if they're doing this, that, and the other. And unfortunately, my granddaughter is in high school, and last year she had a classmate, a freshman boy, attempted suicide. He shot himself, but he wasn't successful. Thank the Lord for that. But also a community just over, my grandsons play baseball, and a young boy at the age of 10 was successful in committing suicide as a result of bullying. Now, those things really bothered me a great deal. And I am all about trying to help with alleviating all of these issues. I've been very active in helping with solving bullying and all of these things. But Mitch, I think that you're spot on with, having to love each other, having to love yourself first. And I think the social media thing is huge and impacts our youth so much. And I know that there's politicians who are trying to do some things about it, but it's parents that are have to make some decisions about the use of social media. I just want your thoughts, Mitch, on what you think that we can do for our youth.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for sharing, Brenda. My heart goes out to those families. It's a different day and time, right? And although Kevin and I have a divergence on when we learn to love or not love, that's what makes Kevin and I have fun together, because we don't have to agree on everything. We're not about agreement, disagreement. We all have different perceptions. I do believe that there is a constant learning and unlearning of love. The unlearning begins in the household. That's what I think happens first. We're seeing that amplified through the lens of social media because of the, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, I didn't know what was happening in New York. If I didn't read the newspaper, I didn't know, much less what was happening in London or South Africa. And so now, because of the exposure via technology, which, by the way, I'm neutral on it. I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent. I'm totally neutral on the technology, because there are some great things that are happening, like what's happening today with this platform. But it does raise the exposure of the knowledge that we're gaining. I'm of the belief that I don't actually think mental health is worse or better than ever before. What I believe is our awareness to mental health, emotional health has been lifted. And when your awareness has been lifted, it increases your exposure. So now I'm actually given more permission in the moments that I don't feel accepted and connected to. Because of my exposure, I'm given more permission to take action on something. That's why we're seeing the increase in teen suicide attempts, teen suicide successes, because they have been given different permission than any other generation before. So to go back to your question, I think, and as a parent who's raised 3 adult children now, they're all grown and gone, but we did raise kids in the age of social media, and it is different. But I do think parents have to be very cognizant of how they're treating their children. So, for instance, Eileen alluded to it. Telling a child you're this or that, that's a huge mistake. I was raised with a dad who I love dearly, but was very critical and had super high expectations. And if Mitchell wasn't perfect, then I got in trouble. That set me up for massive failures as an adult. So as parents, we have to be super cognizant of, empowering our child's authenticity, even if it goes against the culture of our family. And to Kevin's point, when they feel that empowerment and that connection, guess where they're less likely to turn to? Peers and social media. Now, there's still going to some because we're humans. Let's be honest. I like it when I get likes. We all do. But there are great opportunities like Uchi and other opportunities where technology is being used to remove those types of experiences and move into the connected type. So for me, it's the bottom line of empower your child's authenticity early and often, even if it goes against the culture of your family and the belief system. Have enough confidence and courage to know that your child is going to do really fun things in the world if you empower their authenticity and don't take that from them. Now, that's easier said than done as a parent because we're not taught to parent that way. But I do think that is a path to really letting your child lean on themselves rather than leaning on their peers around them.
Thank you. Very well stated. Thank you.
I love
Yeah.
building on Mitch's stuff. So I want to build on the empowering of the authenticity. When we empower a child or a person's authenticity, the message that we're sending and the message that hopefully they're receiving is you're valuable, you matter, who you are, whatever it is that you matter, you're valuable. And in our brain, value translates to love. And love is that basic need that we're trying to get. So when we can empower our children, instead of telling them what they're doing that's right and wrong and good and bad, all of that is judgment. And we use these techniques on a regular basis: judgment, shame, degradation, emotional neglect. These are common micro traumas that we raise our children with. And the message that we send is, you're not loved. That's the message that we send, and that's being received when we shame, judge, degrade, and emotionally neglect. And it disconnects us even further. And that's what we're fearing, I think, more than anything else. We don't fear fear, we fear pain. And when we are being judged and shamed and degraded and emotionally neglected, it hurts. It causes pain. And we don't want that pain anymore. So we avoid these situations where we might experience this pain. So we fear it. We don't want to speak up in class. We don't want to speak up in the workplace. We don't want to speak up on a group call. Whatever it is, we're trying to protect ourselves. And just on the side of social media and everything, what if we thought about it in a different way? What if we thought about social media as a behavior and a solution to our pain? We reach out, we're so desperate to connect with others, we reach out to social media because we're not feeling the connection that we need with our family. The same thing happens with alcohol. I don't feel loved by my spouse or by my family or my workplace or my friends group or whatever. Alcohol numbs my pain. Drugs give me an escape from my pain. Exercise gives me an escape. It tires me out so completely that I can't even go near my emotional pain. So all these behaviors are just different ways that we try to manage our pain, and it all goes back to love and connection and not having that basic need met. So social media to me is really just a solution, a poor solution to try and have connection. And it's not working, and it's actually, in a lot of ways, it makes people feel even worse, which we've seen that data's totally out there. So it's just, we need to understand, I think, that behavior is not the problem. Drugs, alcohol, depression, suicide, those are the symptoms. Those are the solutions to a deeper problem and a basic need that's not being met.
Before we go on, and I want to thank everybody who's either asked or provided us answer to a question. Rick, I know you've been on the call since early, but you've been quiet. You're not necessarily one of the speakers here, but I know you've got some thoughts around what's been going on. Can you add value to the conversation real quick?
I hope that you can find some value in what I'm about to say. As a survivor of family suicide, I understand what kids go through. As I'm gonna try not to get tearful here. When you're a kid, when you're a kid, and you're looking for a mentor, you're looking for a guidance person to help you through the challenges of life, and you have a broken family, you break. And depending on what happens within that broken family will depend on what your actions are going forward to a large degree. And a couple of things. First, try to save the family. Try to save the dad in the house, particularly the dad in the house, because of the masculine flex of that, the masculine input that gives to the balanced family, if that's possible. If it's not possible, you don't. But um, the one thing that my dad's suicide taught me was that suicide's not the answer. That taught me a very, very valuable lesson, because I would never do that to anyone that I loved, because I know what it does to destroy kids. And so one of the reasons that we've been doing what we've done, Cheyenne and myself and others, Keith and others, all of you too, I'm sure, is helping youth become more involved in their own lives in terms of defining their survival capabilities, and hope those basic principles bring that back to life in a behavioral pattern and belief pattern that hopefully helps kids to be able to take all the stuff that's being shoveled at them and break it down based on their inside soul, heart, brain connection, called the essence navigation system, the honesty navigation in there. Because without that, we're lost. And some people call it morals, some people call it other things, some people call it God. Whatever you call it, you need that connection, and you need that parenting to help guide you through it. And especially in America, we have lost our way so badly in what we are meant to be. And I'm not putting anybody down, not saying anything about any kind of particular group or anything like that. But as families, we have really failed, and we continue to fail. And I'll close with this. Florida just passed a law. I know a lot of people feel kind of funky about Florida being a right-sided kind of thing, but they just passed a law that will not allow children to participate in social media before the age of 16. They just passed that law this week. And I applaud it on one side. On the other, it's kind of like, if you have proper parenting, right, then the social media should have less impact on how your kids turn out, and whether they feel bullied or left out or commit suicide or whatever. So it's really up to the parents to control what their kids do. But so much of the parenting has been taken out of the parents' hands and given to society that it's really dangerous. So love you all. I'm glad you thank you for letting me speak for a minute.
Absolutely right.
I was
Absolutely.
hearing Kevin. I was like, oh, Kevin, man. Oh yeah, yeah. And it's the whole thing about suicide. It really, and I've said once before, I'll say it again. If you ever want me to speak in a public venue about the dangers of committing suicide, I'll be happy to do it.
Absolutely. I sure will.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Rick, thank you. Because the focus of these conversations, especially with the Envision Speaker Series, is to find solutions to problems, I'm going to go back to Eileen, Kevin, and Mitch. In 18 minutes or less, find solutions, offer solutions to making connections, real connections with people, please. I don't care who goes first.
No one's going first.
Well,
All
Mitch
right.
Your
gave
turn,
me
Kevin.
Mitch gave me permission to look at all of you and not feel awkward in silence. He actually gave me permission many, many months ago. He says, let silence take care of itself.
I love that. That's awesome. It's powerful. So what I often say about connection, first of all, I think in order to have a real connection, this is where I've landed on it. In order to have real connection, I think there's two key elements, which is both parties need to be sharing comparable kinds of information. That's first. And second, information or experiences. And second, they need to be sharing to a comparable level of depth or intimacy, right? So if someone's just talking about surface stuff and the other person, is talking about feelings and emotions or something, that's a disconnect, and it's going to be hard to feel that connection. But the other two elements is connection takes time and consistency, right? You don't just connect. How many people got into a romantic relationship and they only met, on Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. over a video call, and they developed a romantic relationship, No, you spend hours together. You share deeply. You stay up all night talking, So that's a little bit of connection. But in terms of tools, I'll say, Timothy, he's gone now, but listening is a huge part. And listening to understand and really hear the other person so that they feel heard and understood, that is so powerful. Acknowledging and validating the other person, and I know Eileen will go more into this, but when you feel not just acknowledged, like repeating back like what somebody said, but really validating the feeling behind whatever it is the person is communicating with you, that is so powerful for helping that person feel heard and understood. And then they will feel more of a connection with you because you got their feelings, you got their emotions. And one last thing I'll say is whenever we are engaging with other people, to do everything possible not to shame, judge, degrade, or emotionally neglect that person, because those are the fastest ways to disconnect two people. So listening. And the bonus is you can use the Uchi app. It's free, and it's a way to share your perspective and be heard, but only by the people closest to you, your Uchi.
And we'll talk about Uchi in just a bit.
Yeah.
Eileen, Mitch?
Okay. Okay. I think what I'd like to share today for solution action steps people can start taking is if you have a busy mind, to take some time to clear your mind so that when you're connecting with others, you have that clarity of not making assumptions of what the other person is saying, but the listening for the other person to where that connection can be the strongest in that give and take in the conversation. The other thing I would like to suggest is when you're in that space of who you are, that authenticity, to tell yourself that you do matter and others do care about you. And it's that listening, speaking, and waiting, the power of the pause before speaking again, can bridge the gap between talking over people and frustration and anger setting into a connection that you're trying to make on a heart soul to soul level. And I think it's taking time to be present in the moment when you are with another person or in your own individual experience, and to know what your specific triggers are and to understand those triggers. Then you learn not to react, and again go back inward, look at, okay, why am I being triggered? What's not self-loved? What's not, why did I feel that way? Why did that emotion come up? And when you can work through that on your own and eliminate those triggers, then you have the opportunity to have healthier connections and conversations, communication, and experiences. And that's in personal and business. So those are my tips.
And Mitch?
All of life is practice, right? We don't get it perfect. It's just all about practice. And so my solution would be just get started. Just start somewhere with yourself and with others. And so that might look like I'm going to spend 5 to 10 minutes a day just sitting intentionally with myself. I'm going to spend 20 minutes a day sitting with my children or my partner, my employees, whatever that is, just taking some intentional time to just get started. You don't have to get it right. You don't have to know what to say. You don't have to say the right thing. Just get started and practice. The more you practice, the more it improves. That could look like maybe joining a social group. It could look like maybe starting with social media, maybe starting with a website where you meet with people socially. It could look like all kinds of fun, creative ways, but just get started. Do something. Because when you do something, the doors open to something else that maybe you've never thought of before. So don't try and design it. Don't try and make it exactly how you want. Just get started. It's all practice. It's all play. And in the end, so much of the stuff that we think matters actually doesn't. So just have fun connecting with yourself and with others.
Mitch, I appreciate it. And I'm going to go back to Eileen, Kevin, and then you, Mitch. What are you doing in 2024? What's going on? Books, events, workshops, Uchi app. Talk to me. What's
I
going
talk to
on?
you. Well, I actually have a workshop coming up on Monday at 6 o'clock Eastern time, Introduction to Validation. So if anyone's interested, they can find out more about that on the hoteluniverse.com website. Tab at the very end that says other, and then classes, workshops, and there's a registration form in there. And that's basically just to teach people why there's triggers, some of the things that we all talked about today, and the tool of validation that can be added into your toolbox to start to really feel good about yourself and have healthy conversations. And then there'll be some more workshops and classes coming down the pipeline for 2024.
Cool, cool. Love it. Uh, what's the Uchi app? So we've been looking at the Uchi name. You've been mentioning it in your conversation. Give us some insight.
Yeah, so Uchi is the Japanese word for in-group or inner circle, and our whole mission is to help people connect with those most important to you. So Uchi is a free social platform. It's available on, App Store and Google Play, and it's really simple. You just download it and you just answer questions from the database. There are all kinds of questions covering all kinds of topics, and only your Uchi friends can read your answers, and they can only read your answer if they've already answered that question. So there's a true reciprocity. And again, you can't have a connection in a relationship if it's not a two-way street. And that's one of the big problems of social media, is that we blast everything out there, but we're not having anything really coming back in. How do you have a connection? So, Uchi is a way to connect, not in real time. It's asynchronous. You just answer questions whenever.
Yeah.
And then it can be used as a tool in schools, in businesses, in your own family, in any kind of group. It could be church youth group. It could be your, volleyball club, whatever it is, where you can come up with your own questions as the Uchi tribe leader. You come up with questions. You invite a small group of people, up to 10 people. And when you're in an Uchi tribe, nobody else has access to what's going on there. None of your Uchi friends from your regular free side of Uchi have access to what's going on in your Uchi tribe. So in fact, we're going to be doing an Uchi tribe after the validation workshop that Eileen is holding on Monday. We're going to follow up to continue to practice everything that we learn in the workshop and to continue to connect and practice all the validation techniques. And you can validate someone through writing. And that's one other thing about Uchi, is it's only the written word. So there's no video, no pictures, no audio. It's only the written word, and it's incredibly powerful how well you can communicate through writing. We think that we have to be face to face and in person and verbally communicate in order to connect, but we have 2,500 years of data showing that two people can have a profoundly deep connection just from writing letters, even writing letters once a month. It's been done for ages. So the power of the written word, and Brenda knows about it. She did the journaling with the teenager, and it's incredible how people open up through writing when they don't feel comfortable in person or they don't think of it right on the spot. Anyway, so Uchi, have fun, get it in your schools and businesses, use it as a tool, use it for yourself, and connect.
Kevin, thank you so much. Mitch, anything going on with you in 2024 that you want to share?
Potentially some new books that we're working on. We'll see if they release in 2024. We do have a mental health workshop that we're offering where we're helping communities really change the language around mental health and how they talk about it in their communities, taking inventory of what's available in their community, how they're marketing those resources. We had a pilot in October that went really well. So we're looking for more communities to take part in that. And then I'm always looking for new business clients where we help teams with hiring and recruiting and designing great culture and understanding the art of humanity inside the marketplace. And so would love to hear from someone. MitchGrayMedia.com is the website, and I'd love to connect.
Mitch, thank you. All of you, thank you so much. We have completed the first half of this event, and I've been sitting here since 9:30. I'm going to keep my camera on, but I got to excuse myself. So this is gonna stay recorded and this is gonna stay live streamed. My camera is going to be on, no harm done. For those of you who want to stay on the call, I appreciate it. Brenda, you're coming up after I come back, or I do think that's true. I think it's you, Michelle, and then Carrie, Sarah, and Marlene. And so I think that's the order for the afternoon, right? Okay, cool. I'll see y'all. And for those who I don't see, have a great day. Have a great weekend. Cheyenne, if I don't, we got a call tomorrow, right? You, me, Rick, and some other folks.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, I'll be back.
So we can fill the gap with conversation if you guys want to.
Well, unfortunately, I got to hop off, but I just want to say thank you, everybody. And I think this is an awesome group of people, and we all have something to add to society in the form of our different aspect of change and helping others. So I look forward to what might be in the future together as a group, and wish everybody a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Eileen.
You're
Bye,
welcome.
Eileen.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, so this has been wonderful so far. Yeah.
Yeah, it has. Richard, I'd like to know more about your feelings and your story. I really liked what you shared, and I thank you for sharing that's suicide in teens and young families. I also coach and mentor principals, and I just had a principal of a K2 building, and she has a child in her building who just lost a father to an overdose, and I'm coaching her through that. It's very difficult for young children to lose a father or a mother. So any strategies you have for me, I appreciate that.
Well, I think letting the child be heard, letting them have their feelings without, trying to cure them. I think that's one of the worst things we do in our society too. Is I don't know about other societies, but I know in America we seem to want to cure everybody, or not cure everybody, want to treat everybody.
Want to fix it. Try to fix it.
Yeah, but this is one of those things where everybody needs to understand that it's not fixable. You can't repair it. You can live with it. You can learn how to compartmentalize it. You can learn how to file it away, but it's always with you. It never leaves you. And that's one of the things that I speak about whenever anyone asks me to discuss with people who are even thinking about suicide is there's no treating the results of your suicide to the people around you. you may think that you're doing everybody a favor, but you absolutely are not. And so, yeah, it took me 30 years to get over it, to the point where I felt like I was being more productive in my life. I mean, yeah, I got married, I had kids, had, career stuff going on, but I was also very self-destructive for most of my life. And it wasn't until I had a good mentor who helped me to ascend, if you will. I mean, I went through saving, I went through Jesus, being saved, and I believe in God and creation. And I believe that this is all now, I believe this is all a lesson I needed to learn in this particular lifetime before I move on. But yeah, so my only suggestion to you is don't abandon the kid for one thing. Do not let that child get away from you in terms unless that child really wants to. But even then, I would stress to whatever parent is left, if there is one, to allow you to communicate on some level, either through the other parent or whatever. Because here's a really good piece for y'all, because I experienced this. Finding the right friend, the right adult friend to help that kid. Big brothers and sisters. I went through that whole fiasco. And I'm not saying big brothers and sisters is a bad thing necessarily, but when I was back in the 60s, when I was exposed to it, they didn't have a very good vetting process. And so you got all kinds of crazy people that wanted to just come in and be with mom and take advantage of kids and do those things. So it's really important if you take on that role of mentoring a child who has survived family suicide, make sure that if you're going to hand that kid, that you don't leave that kid abandoned, that you either stick with that child for as long as they need to, even if it's all their lives, or you make sure you hand them off to somebody that is going to do good for them. Because that, like I said, you don't, you can heal, you can forgive, you can do that, but it's always with you, and you're always going to be you're always going to be needing that that bridge, so that you don't do something stupid yourself. Because I was talking to a friend of mine last night, and it was like, I said, it's amazing how many people don't even think they're trying to commit suicide. They drink themselves to death, or they drug themselves to death over, they may not even think in their mind, or they get drunk, or they do something like total a truck by hitting into a tree after going through a terrible relationship breakup. That's a suicide attempt. There's no other way you can't get around that. So I see that Keith is back, but so please, I beg you, find ways to stay in that kid's life. Let the kid have its room to breathe and grow. And if you need me to talk to somebody, I'll be happy to do it. If I will talk to someone as someone who's experienced it myself. I know what she's going through.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing. Yeah, definitely. You said exactly what I said to the principal, is that just don't abandon. Make sure that you give them space and support. So
yeah, she's probably feeling guilt to some degree too.
Yeah.
As though she contributed something to that person dying. I know I did. I wanted to know why I couldn't help him, why I couldn't save him. And that was probably one of the worst things for me to deal with. Was he committed suicide when I was 14, which means that I was in the process of coming out of adolescence into manhood. And it was a real hard pill to swallow, to realize that there was nothing I could do. I didn't realize that till later in life, but
yeah,
for a long time I blamed myself and my mom and my sister.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
So it's
well,
a journey.
We're glad you're here. Thank you for sharing.
Sure. Hi, Keith.
Hey, what did I miss? So Brenda,
you've heard it before.
I know. So Brenda, you can, if you need to get, eat, drink, or whatever, I'll start it at 10 after. And Carrie
I'm
Carrie
good.
Allen's on the call. So you're good. I still want to give other folks kind of jump in, and I'm gonna my thoughts. But
Hold on, I got something going on in my house, so let me see what the noise is. Hold on.
okay, okay.
Uh-oh. Is Timothy still on here?
No, I think he dropped
Okay.
easily 11:30-ish.
Yeah.
About that time. Michelle,
Oh,
welcome
okay.
to the call. Carrie, welcome to the call. It's good to see both of you.
Yeah, I already love Michelle from the way she talks. I haven't even met her. I mean, I've met
You
her, but
haven't
I
met
haven't.
her? We'll
Yeah.
introduce each other. Michelle, this is Rick. Rick, this is Michelle.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for already loving me when I've never even met you. Love that.
Well, we've got a special bond, I think, and we both share someone dying from suicide,
Mm.
and so we know what it is to go through that healing process and having to live with that the rest of our lives. So um, I listened to your piece with what I was putting together little snippets of all of you. I don't know if you received those or not, but I can get them to you if you haven't. But there's a little snippet of you in the pod series, um, and I was very touched by your whole story about what you've gone through, about how you deal with it, about what you're writing about, and so I'm excited to hear what you have to say today. And so yeah, I love you. Yeah, I do.
I love
Yeah,
you too, Richard. Thank you.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, and
Well,
send me the snippet again because my email, my business email went down for a couple days and I am still trying to crawl out of that. Of course, it was this week with all of this going on, but I fixed
Okay,
it.
okay,
So yeah, if anyone sent me anything to my business email between Wednesday and Friday, it bounced. I didn't get it.
okay.
Thank you.
so and I appreciate all that. Now as the host here, I am curious because I see that again, the only thing that I'm looking at when I'm not looking at the Zoom call is if I go to Firefox, I do see our live stream. And so the only people who show up on the live stream are actually who got their cameras on. So each of those people who have their cameras off, they drop out of the live stream call. Are This is my ego stepping in. Is anybody involved in the chat on? Is there a chat involved or is there an, if not, I'm okay with that too. Um,
No,
Oh, they're in there. Yeah, they're in there.
there's been lots
Mhm.
of great comments, Keith,
oh,
including
cool.
Nomi, and I've had a few comments in there. But yeah, it's a
No, I'm
very
talking about on the YouTube,
yeah.
not,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
no,
And
that
then
is.
Gulam,
Yeah,
Gulam, Cheyenne, Estelle, me. Yeah, we keep it alive.
yeah.
But everybody should go on YouTube if they can and hit the like button too, because especially while we're still live, it'll bring more people in.
yeah.
There's the tech, there's the tech guru right there. Because
Oh, we're learning so much. We with this tech stuff, man. We are. I mean, I think we're killing it, but we are learning and stumbling and getting. But Cheyenne, man, she's got marketing piece down pretty good.
well, I've got two things going well today. Well, a couple of things, but one, for Carrie's sake, this call has not dropped. And I say that that's an inside joke between me and her because when we were testing this, and she's my backup, well, she's my back. I got co-host, but she's my backup facilitator in case my call drops between now and 2 o'clock. But on that
Mhm.
call, I think it was earlier this week, well, Spectrum decides to get in cohorts with Virginia Power, and they cut my power for the entire neighborhood. And so literally within 2 minutes of saying, in case my call drops, and that call drops. It was just like so ironic. Um, but everybody else's internet, wherever you are in the world, it's working. And the recording and the YouTube live stream have not stopped. And so I am happy for that because you never know with a live stream. And as Rick just said, Technology is technology and it likes to play games. Okay. So with that being said, Brenda, let me know when you're ready.
Ready?
Okay. So I want to again thank you, and Carrie and Estelle and Noemi comes in and out of the conversation. Michelle, thank you for joining us. And Cheyenne, if you're hanging out for the next 2 hours, I hope you're going to have some fun here. Brenda, I have to start our conversation before even I give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. The questions. You always, I'm the question guy, but you've got the questions.
I do.
The questions are, and this is what I remember from our conversation in order to prepare for this conversation. How is this going to make me feel good? How is
Mhm.
this going to make me feel safe? And then the coin flips. How is this going to make the other person feel good? How is this going to make the other person feel safe? Am I on target here?
Yeah, you are. You are.
Okay. So with that
Definitely.
being said, we're going to answer those questions, but first you're going to tell everybody on this call and anybody who's watching on YouTube who you are and what brings you to this conversation.
Yeah, so I am Brenda Yoho, the author of Lead with Two Rules. I'm blurred out so you can't see it. Feeling good and feeling safe. Those are my two rules. So I am a former educator. I started my career as a teaching assistant and climbed my way all the way up to director of education, and I retired. Now, what Keith is talking about is the 4 questions that I teach to the children that I've served. And so I start out with talking with the children and with the staff in an all group session. And it doesn't matter if you have a small school or a very large school. The importance of the first meeting is establishing that trust and asking and telling the students that I'm going to earn their trust, because every child in a school should have a trusting adult that they can come to. And that's what the whole goal is of Two Rules. And so I tell them that they can look at all of the rules that we have in the handbook, and they will see that every one of those rules make you and ask you to feel good and feel safe. And so my talk is everybody who walks through the doors of our school is going to feel good about being here, and they're going to feel safe. And how we go about that is asking those 4 questions that Keith just shared with us. Before I say anything, I'm going to ask, is this going to make me feel good? Is this going to make others feel good? Before I do anything, is this going to make me feel safe? Is this going to make others feel safe? Now, if I've answered no to any of those questions, I've identified a problem in need of a solution. That tells me I need to go and ask a trusted adult to help me in solving that problem. And so that's when we take on the role of helping them to sit down and start having a conversation about how to solve a problem. So earlier in the show, you had an acronym, WAIT. Why am I talking? I love that. I love that. One of the things that I think that I talk about in the book is, how am I talking? That's very important. How am I talking? And I talk about how we talk with students and with families and with staff. It's all about how we were talking. See, education is something we do with children, not to them. So before you ever address a behavior, you have to say and address the child first. Instead of saying, hey, you, stop running in the hallway. That's rude. That's not being very, very nice. So instead, I should say, Keith, hey, you want to come over here for a second? Hey, you're running in the hallway. How's come? That's how you talk to kids. It shows respect, right?
Mhm. So let's go a bit deeper. How would we, as administrative people in schools or two adults in a conversation, go into a conversation with those two things in mind, because we as adults have to model behavior to children, before we could do anything else. And so they're going to look at us and watch our behaviors. They're going to listen to our words and how we say and what we say. So in this type of environment, I'm hoping, and this is what I've been doing since the beginning of the Question Guy podcast, is bringing people to the table, but allowing them to feel safe. And
Mhm.
that's actually one of the words I've been using consistently in every conversation that I have, because the Question Guy podcast was designed around people's personal story. And unless I create an environment, virtually speaking, it's still an environment where people feel unsafe. If they feel unsafe, they're not going to share. Now, for some reason, either innately or through practice, I've gotten really good at it. And so, and I'm hoping that's consistent throughout. And so, meaning that it's me, it's who Keith McNally is that brings that element of, this is going to be a safe place for us to have this conversation. Now, other conversations around Coach's Corner about people's personal, I'm not personal, professional expertise, that's a different conversation altogether. And they just kind of want to share what they do. But the Question Guy, this series and another series called Conversations. And there's also another conversation I have that Rick has been on specifically, where I allow people to talk about their experiences with suicide. That's a different conversation altogether. I have to create an environment where people feel safe. What is the right way of going about doing that? And you're the expert. Tell me.
Well, the first thing, when you're working with an individual is to be authentic and understand that they have a story to tell. And one of the very first things that I learned as a new administrator was to listen to what's not said. So you look at individuals and you can read them by body language, and you can understand that they have more to tell you just by, my mom always told me to look people in the eyes, because you can tell that that's the window to their soul. You really can. You can tell if they're happy, sad, and they have more to tell. And she's right. I noticed a young lady in my first, years as an administrator, and she just looked sad every time I walked past her. She just looked sad. So I embarked on a journey with her, and I knew I didn't have a lot of time. I could pull her into my office every day to talk with her. So instead, I started writing with her. But how you can create an environment where people can feel safe psychologically is by your words, the words that you choose to use, and how you say them, and also how you use your body language to talk with them, how open you are with them, and the wait time that you use. So some of the questions that I may have said as a administrator in the school district, I might have said, things like, what do you think about the school? Do you have rules here that you think are not fair? I might think, ask them their opinions on different things. And I may say, what's your favorite thing about school? Or what do you like to do? It's all about asking questions that are not threatening or judging, or that you can kind of open up to. Like I might say, I don't like in this school the rule of chewing gum, that you're not allowed to do that. I think that's not a good rule. How about you? What do you think? Because that was always a big issue in our school about chewing gum. And I was the principal. I didn't like it.
When a
So that's
student, well, when a student actually gives you some input and insight into a question that is, and I'll use the word, safe to answer because they're not feeling judged by anything, and that you're giving them space to validate their thoughts, how do they respond to you or to that environment where they feel good? And that's your other
well,
word.
yeah. Well, I can tell you that on my very first day as a new principal at a middle school, 602 kids. Okay. Nobody knew me. The kids didn't know me. The staff didn't know me. First day, I have all the kids, everybody in the gym. I asked the teachers to leave. They looked at me like I was a crazy person. Nobody moved. And I said, no, teachers, really, you can leave for just like 10 minutes. I just want to talk with the kids.
They
And
didn't want to
then,
even, you didn't even tell them?
so
Oh my goodness.
finally somebody moved. And then a couple other people left. And then one teacher walked by me. Are you sure about this? I'm like, yeah, go ahead and leave. Because they had a reputation of being really, fights would break out. It was just really not a good school. And I'm like, no. And so the teachers left. They went down just a little hallway, but they were peeking in the gym doors to make sure that I was okay. And so I started the conversation with the students. And what I did was I just raised my hand and started making eye contact with some kids, and they started raising their hands. And then pretty soon everybody had their hands raised. And I told them that's how you start a conversation. I'm not going to yell and scream. I said, they lowered their hands I said, I want to have a conversation with you. And I said, I just want to tell you, the teachers are peeking in because they already think I'm a little crazy because I've asked them all to leave. And they started to laugh. And I said, I trust you guys. And I want you to trust me. I want to have a conversation about, I only have 2 rules. And I think you're probably going to think I'm crazy too, but I do. And that's how I introduced the 2 rules. And that's how I established that we were going to work on being trusting with each other. And my promise to them that the 2 rules would really help everyone, because I told them that if they thought about the rules and they applied them to everything that was in the handbook, they would understand I was trying to work on feeling good and feeling safe. And that in life, everybody has rules to follow, and that they already had power, and their power was choice. You always can choose. Now you can choose to be part of the problem or part of the solution. The choice is always yours to make. So if you come to my office, if you're sent to my office, the first question I'm going to ask you, did you choose to be part of the problem or part of the solution? And I'm going to wait for you to answer that, because that's what you need to tell me. And then the next thing I'm going to ask you is, so what's the consequence? Because you have to be responsible for the choices that you make. Because I'm responsible for the choices I make in life. You're always going to be responsible for the choices that you make, whether they're good or poor. And so it's really simple to explain that to kids early in life, so they understand that process and they're building those skills to develop. And it worked. The kids understood. We said it consistently every single day. And the kids began to feel very safe about having conversations with us, because they knew we were on their side and we were trying to fix things. And it took a little while because we were building those connections, but I consistently said the same things and I waited. In my book, I talk about the different ways in which we help them to visually see how to work out a problem and how we talked about it. Now, how I came up with these rules is a way back to my 3rd grade year.
Well, give us some insight, because we want to talk about some practice items, some to-do items, some things that we can leave our audience to say, ooh, I like what Brenda has to say. Let me put something in practice. Give us some insight.
So when I was in 3rd grade, I had a teacher who asked me to take a test to go home and have it signed by my parent. So I did. And I brought it back. I laid it on her desk. She took a look at it and she raised it up and she shouted out, Brenda, I don't think your mom signed this. I think you did. Go out to the hallway.
Oh no.
Well, I'm pretty old, so no phones in the classrooms. So she asked the other teacher from the next classroom that she needed to go downstairs to call my mom. I'm begging her not to call home. So she thinks I'm guilty. Now everybody's looking at me. I understood why she thought I was guilty, because the signature had been erased several times. But the problem was the teacher didn't know me and didn't know my family. I had just experienced death for the very first time. I had been gone from school for about a week or more. My mom's mother, my grandmother, passed away. So I had missed some classes, so I didn't understand the math. But the big secret is my family was uneducated. My parents didn't know how to read or write or anything, but my mom knew how to write her name. It was beautiful. But because she had such high regard for teachers, she didn't like the way it looked the first time or the second time. And finally, I said, I had to go to school, Mom. Sign the paper. I'm going. So I didn't feel good and I didn't feel safe.
But that was a catalyst for everything else. And so fast forward to now, how do you in your book create that safe space?
So
what are some to-do items?
So some to-do items is this. I believe home, school, and community need to work together and to help the child in every way we possibly can. It takes all of us working together to meet the needs of the children that we serve. And what I mean by that is this, is that our children need all of us, not just one part of us. They need all of us. And our parents need us. We have all these plates that we're trying to spin in a world that is changing constantly. Our parents need us to support them. They are trusting us each day with the most valuable thing they have in life, their children. And we're their partners. So as educators, as I said earlier, education is something we do with children, not to them. And our parents need us to support them. And our parents need to be part of that partnership. And I'm asking the community to be part of that partnership because we need resources. So we need some partnership in helping us to make sure that the environments that we are raising our children in are safe and they feel good. So one of the things that I ask is that communities come together and they find things that they can do to help promote families. So one of the things that I did when I was a director of education, I asked the community to come together so that we're not stepping on each other's toes, so that we can create a community calendar where we could send home with our families and they could see activities that were going on that families could go to, free things that they could do, or things that they could do that maybe cost just a little bit. Because unfortunately, not everybody comes from a lot of money. Some people are having a struggle with living paycheck to paycheck. And some parents are working a couple of jobs, some maybe 3, to make ends meet. So it takes all of us, like I said, to make the difference that we want to see.
Thank you so much. Brenda, tell me about your book. Where can we get it? And I believe, wait. There's a book launch coming up at, time of this recording. And even so, it's still the 27th of January, 2024. Book launch?
Yes.
Book launch
is February the 7th. You can go to my website and you can get information about it. We're doing a virtual launch and we're doing an in-person launch, but you can get the book at Amazon or Barnes and Noble. But here's what I want to say, Keith, to your people who are watching, the people who are watching this in live stream. If they will reach out to you and tell you that they're interested in learning more about Lead with 2 Rules, I will send them a free copy.
I'm going to beat that book launch. I'm going to be there virtually anyway because I can't get there in person. So I've already registered. I'm going to beat that book launch. And I think
you also endorsed the book. So people should know that as well. You endorsed the book. It's in your comments are in the book. It means so much to me to get the message out there and that I want to help every leader who wants to implement this to implement it. I will give them all the support I possibly can because I do know that this will work because kids need to learn the skills that are in this book, and principals and schools will be so much better for it, and so will families and communities. So I will give people a free copy of the book. If they contact you and are watching you, I will give them a copy.
So for those who are watching, make sure you say, I saw Brenda on the Envision Speaker Series.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let her know. You got to give me your address. And so, if, like a physical book, free physical, I can pick it up and hold it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We will make that happen. Brenda, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Michelle, you ready? It's your turn. So I got a question to ask first, and then we're going to talk about who you are, and we'll get into conversation. Okay?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Oh, I can hear you great. Sounds great.
Great.
Where'd you go, Michelle? Their face
I'm
dropping out
here.
of the call. So when you drop out of the call, you change. But I was looking at my camera. Michelle, we are our own worst enemy. We're so critical of ourselves, and I want to get into that in this conversation because we're going to talk about compassion, especially for ourselves. So before we kind of get into that, Michelle, who are you and what brings you to this conversation?
Thank you, Keith. Thank you for having me. Just so grateful to be here and so humbled by everyone that I've already heard today to be part of this just exceptional group of educators and leaders and helpers. Amazing. Who am I? That is a great how long did you say I have?
Don't not too philosophical. We only got 30 minutes.
Oh, okay, 30 minutes. Yeah, that's fine. I am a grief educator. That is my passion. I am a grief coach, a yoga therapist, a wellness coach, and the list goes on. But my passion at this point in my life is grief education and support of people in grief. And I'm doing this privately in groups and corporately, developing programs for corporations to help people reintegrate after bereavement leave, which is always too short, educating the griever and the human resources, those people, to make a smoother transition because corporations lose billions of dollars every year on ineffective reintegration. You know, people aren't ready. You're not the same person 3 days after you lost your loved one. If you have 3 days of bereavement leave, you come back and it's, you know, you wouldn't expect somebody to come back 3 days after a back surgery or a heart surgery or a brain surgery. And grief can be just as injurious to your mental well-being and mental abilities. So it's educating about grief, both the griever and the community. Those are my passions. How did I get here? Well, I've had my own series of losses, including the loss of my mom. I was 41, which isn't super young, but it was, we had a very codependent relationship, which I learned later can be positive and negative. And I was incredibly dependent on her. So I had to not only learn about grief of a primary person in my life, but also how to stand on my own 2 feet, which was a lot for one loss. Ended up going through a divorce, remarriage, and then my husband, my second husband, died by suicide. So then I'm on another learning curve about mental illness and suicide and how to survive suicide loss. So meanwhile, I'm a yoga therapist and a wellness coach when I go into this big loss. And I have these tools that are supposed to, and a meditation teacher, and I have these tools that are supposed to be helping me. And I am disabled by trauma and grief. Over the next several years, I learned to manage trauma by going to a trauma therapist and using several techniques, which you and I have talked about in the previous calls, and with Georgina. Shout out, Georgina, if you're out there. And realized how useful all of this can be to people who are in grief. And even if you haven't lost a loved one, there's always grief, and we just don't give it enough airtime. You could, it could be that you lost a job, or you moved and you loved your previous home and you're grieving the things you loved about your previous home. We've all gone through a collective grieving going through the pandemic together. We all grieve, you know, maybe we're coming out of it now, but everyone grieved the life they had before COVID-19 came around. So learning to manage grief and live with it and grow through it has become an education I'm able to give others, both based on my own education and studying and my own personal experience.
So let's dive a little into that. And one, how do we heal? And that's a big open-ended question. And I know each person takes a different path, a different journey, and that's the name of my book. But there are things that people can do to kind of say, I can get through this. But sometimes it comes from the inside. Sometimes it comes from the outside. For me, it came from the outside. Somebody told me you can get through this because I made my, my second attempt on against my life in 2021. Can you talk a little bit about that and your journey to healing?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Oh, it's a big one. You mentioned at the beginning of our call today, self-compassion. And that is one of the pillars, in my opinion, of recovering from anything, really. I've also recovered from addiction. Didn't even mention that in my bio, but I've been sober 5 years now, going on 6. Yeah, big, huge change in my life for that. And it's telling yourself, I loved your story earlier when you were saying, all I had to do was breathe and get out of bed.
That's what I was told. I gotta breathe and get out
right?
of bed. Yeah.
You find something doable to build your self-efficacy, because so much of our pain, and this was also mentioned earlier, is that self-critic. We are so mean to ourselves. And if you remove the self-critic, oftentimes I'll tell people to treat yourself like your best friend would treat you. Would your best friend ever say the things you're saying to yourself to you? I hope the answer is no, because maybe then your choice of friends needs to kind of be modified. But that is so important. We want to support ourselves. We want to be our own best friend if we can. And then we need our team. We need your Mitch, right? We need to be able to have somebody who can, if today's not a get out of bed day, to come over and pull the covers down and yank our hand out and say, let's go to coffee. So after my mom passed, I'm Jewish, so we do a very quick funeral. And then we have our week of mourning, and then our month, and then our year. It's a beautiful ritual in Judaism. After my mom died, she died on a Friday, the funeral was Sunday. I went to bed. I couldn't manage anything. I had 3 small children at the time. They were coming, driving my kids to school, bringing meals, all of these things. I was incapacitated. Sunday night to Thursday. I don't think I got out of bed, honestly. I mean, obviously for physical reasons, but on Thursday, my best friend came over and she did what I'm just describing. She's like, we are going to go get pedicures, because by that point, I figured I was never going to get out of bed again. I was incapacitated. And that was the beginning of my journey toward healing. Was, okay, get up. I got up. and then the next day and the next day and the next day. And I had that information. I had that experience when my husband died. And I noticed, it's some people, there's different people, and Brene Brown talks about this so beautifully, overdoers and underdoers, right? I am the one who collapses when grief and trauma come. Some people, they go to overdoing, and so they'll want to coordinate everything and have a list and not sleep and not, they'll just be going. So my way isn't the only way, but I think it's really important, back to the self-compassion. I was also beating up on myself, and what that's doing is like putting obstacles on the path to healing. It's like, oh, I can't believe I can't get out of bed today. I can't believe I can't return this phone call. And especially after Glenn died, I had to manage the estate. And he was a retired serviceman. He had been a Navy SEAL was in the service for 22 years. And then he had been a government employee for 12. So I had some massive corporations that I had to deal with in order to get the paperwork done. And sometimes this was a whole day on the phone. Sometimes I would call an organization I needed to talk to about Glenn's death and get a busy signal. So the days that I would feel like I can't even pick up the phone and make a phone call, then I would beat up on myself. So the phone call, say, is like a 50-pound, weight that I'm carrying. And then the beating up on myself is another 50-pound weight that I'm carrying. And learning how to say, okay, and nurture this, right? Instead of adding to it, nurturing yourself by saying, how about today's win is pouring yourself a bowl of cereal? That's going to be my win today. Or getting out of bed. Sometimes that's all you do. Maybe not. Maybe today I can't get out of bed, and my win's going to be, I'm going to read a chapter of a book, or I'm going to read a post somewhere, doing something like that. Or maybe getting some extra sleep if you're already in bed. That's a great way to spend your time. So it's bringing yourself in as your own cheerleader. And if you can take care of yourself that way, then you have a moment to be able to say, okay, this is what I need right now. And I can't provide it for myself because I am carrying this 50-pound weight. So who can I call? And and I talk about that in my books that came out last year. They just had their 1-year-old birthday. Thank you. My book twin, I had 2 books come out the same day, which I don't recommend any aspiring authors out there. I highly recommend one at a time. Having
Well, let's
twins.
talk about your books. What's the title of your books? Both of them.
So I'm just going to grab this because the title's really long.
Okay.
Surviving Spouse or Partner Suicide Loss, a mindful guide for your journey through grief. Okay. And then the partner book that came out the same day is Supporting a Survivor of Spouse or Partner Suicide Loss. And that was, I had to bring those 2 books out together because one of the things, like I was just starting to get into with the team, that I wasn't great about or even really good about was figuring out who's being helpful and who's just really in trauma. Because most of my inner circle was traumatized by Glenn's suicide, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. So if everyone's in trauma, it's really hard to support each other. So even though, as the spouse and of course our children, he had 3 and I had 3 when we got married. So, and no, we were not the Brady Bunch. It was more like the dark side of the Brady Bunch, missing an Alice, very deeply missing Alice. We could have used it. It was finding the people, like, for example, my trauma therapist. She was a huge help. The guy who introduced me to Glenn, even though he was very sad and grieving, he was strong enough to sit with me in my grief, in my trauma. and support me to finding a trauma therapist. Without him, he was my Mitch. He was my, you gotta take care of yourself, because you're, as you know, one of the risk factors for suicide is a primary relative that died by suicide. So my suicide risk was very high, and there were many times where I was in that dark place and thinking, I can't take this pain. I need to go. If Glenn can do it, I can do it. So it's a matter of finding those people that will pull back those covers and make you go get a pedicure and bring you food, and the things that you can't do for yourself, who aren't also flattened by the grief and trauma that you are experiencing. And I go into that in depth in my books to try to explain, as a griever, or especially if you're traumatized, which most suicide loss, you also have trauma with your grief, which is, a double impact. Most people who are going through that are not really good at making decisions. So you may or may not. Brain disconnects. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Just like mine did. I kind of did that just now. Did you see that happen?
It's okay.
I just wanted to give an example, a living example of how that happens.
But the brain disconnects, and you can't even do some normal stuff that otherwise you could.
Right. Like my example of not being able to make those phone calls.
Yeah. But at some point, you have to go through that. I had a recent conversation with somebody a couple of weeks back, and somebody told her, you've got to walk through the valley of death, and that comes out of Psalm 23. Sometimes in order to heal, you've got to go through the pain.
Yeah.
Can you talk
I
about
don't
it?
even think sometimes. Actually, I just gave a class yesterday called Feel It to Heal It. Okay. And I learned that saying from David Kessler, who was my grief educator teacher, my grief educator certifier. David Kessler worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and he's a international grief expert. What we do, and we've talked about this over the course of these conversations today about numbing out. So it's hard. It's just hard to be alive right now. There's so much stress, so much go, so much stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight. I have to post, I have to work 10 hours a day. I have to, there's no planning to be, there's only planning to do. What did you do today? And so there's very little support for the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest, digest, and heal. So we are, as a society, as a culture, leaning toward the numbing because that's doing something, right? I'm drinking, which is what I did after Glenn died. I was abusing alcohol and drugs, both prescription and illegal. Anything to not feel that excruciating pain. And I mean, sure, you could say, oh, I wouldn't blame her, except all that was doing was making my brain less functional to heal. And it wasn't sustainable because it was killing me. So what you need to do, in my experience and my opinion, is feel, but just a little bit at a time. This is what got me through, using practices of mindfulness, meditation. My trauma therapist had so many great tools to help me be with the trauma, to help me be with the pain. And little bit at a time, I would sit in her office, and I do this now with my coaching practice with people who have gone through loss. Just a little bit. You start to tell the story, and then you come back into your body. Breathe, feel your breath. And sometimes breathing doesn't work when you're traumatized. So I use another tool, this is a great one for calming. Just bring your fingertips together. Everyone on the call, you can try this right now. It's a mindfulness practice that is so effective. Yeah, you can do it in prayer or just like this. And just feel the connection of each finger to its partner. What'd that take? 10 seconds? And maybe it takes longer, depending on how activated you are. But it brings you in. And there's grounding practices, breathing practices, connecting with nature, physical practices. There are many people that I work with and that I talk to who are unable to sit to meditate because their minds are blah. If you've never practiced meditation, and I tell you, an ideal practice is sitting for 20 minutes twice a day, which I would never do, by the way. But that's my original meditation teachers were that's the prescription. Well, if you are in trauma or have a really busy mind, forget sitting for 20 minutes. So what I've learned since then, going forward, is you have to tailor it to the people you're working with. Don't tell me you can't meditate. Same thing with don't tell me you can't do yoga. I teach yoga to a population of people, some of whom are in wheelchairs. If you can breathe, you can do yoga. You don't have to be all bendy and whatever.
Carrie's laughing. She totally agrees because she does a yoga on Mondays on LinkedIn, and she's taught me, I don't mean to interrupt, that I'm
That's okay.
actually, because I hike, I'm training for the AT hike in
Oh, yes,
2025.
I've seen your videos. They're very impressive of you in the gym.
I appreciate that, but that's another story. During that time, I count and I think, and so for me, I can't sit on, I'm not crossing legs any and all that, I'm not doing it. But I'm meditating because I'm blocking the world out, focusing on what I got to focus on, and by golly, I've got to because hiking 15 miles a day is hell. But I get through it because
Right.
I'm centered. I've learned to
Mm-hmm.
center me, which is what you teach because you've learned it.
Yeah. That's
Through,
a mindfulness practice. Absolutely. So people can meditate standing up.
yeah.
They
Yeah.
can meditate by focusing on anything. I taught last interview we had together, I taught that 5 sense practice. It's whatever works for whatever amount of time you can do it. And when you build the muscle of mental stillness, it's really magical. It is the magic that makes life beautiful. You can take your suffering and turn it into enjoying by using mindfulness and learning how, because it helps you to be able to choose your thoughts and your feelings. And I know that can sound absolutely impossible, right? What do you mean choose my feelings? I feel bad. I'm sad right now. There's no way I can change that. Well, that's not true. If you practice mindfulness enough, instead of going to the cafeteria of feelings or thoughts and having your mind slop all that stuff onto your tray and you get what you get, practicing mindfulness, being adept at it, which takes practice and constant practice. One of the speakers earlier, I
Mitch
remember if
said
it
it's always
was it
practice.
Mitch?
Yeah. Life
Practices,
is
yeah.
practice.
Life is practice, yeah. But then you get to go to the buffet instead of the cafeteria, and you get to select exactly what you want on your tray. It's not easy.
No.
But it's doable, it's possible, and it's magic. Mindfulness practice is magic.
Is that my new hashtag?
Mindfulness is magic?
Yes, that's perfect.
I haven't searched that hashtag. If it's out there, then we should support it.
I love it. I do appreciate that. With the time that we have left in our conversation, people who are watching and listening on this particular call, and for those when it gets recorded and released on YouTube again on LinkedIn, as our part of the conversation. And I want Carrie to kind of jump into this because her colleagues aren't here yet, and I'm really upset and scared because at 1 o'clock I'm supposed to transition to her group. But talk to me about meditation. Carrie, Michelle, how does it help you gain perspective on your life? So, Michelle, hold on. Carrie, please join the conversation. How does mindfulness and meditation help you become present in your life again? I know it's a jump in but we've had these conversations. We've
No,
had some of these conversations.
I'm just trying to figure out where to start.
Well, I'm only giving you 2 minutes because we're supposed to, because Marlene and Sarah,
Sarah,
they're
yeah.
late to the call.
Well, I thought we're starting at 1:15, right?
Oh, well, all right. Well, I'll give you that.
Okay, just keeping you on track.
I appreciate that.
Um, I think mindfulness and meditation for me is all about slowing down. And the one thing that I would say has been supportive in me thinking about how important that is, and then finding many, many different ways to support that in my life is I started hearing myself say to my children, hurry up, get in the car, hurry up, we're late, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And I was like, why are we hurrying? We're always hurrying. Why are we hurrying? What's the urgency, right? Like, what is that? And so as I started to peel back the layers, it just started to open up for me. Why am I always in a rush? What am I rushing towards? Like, it just, it allowed me to gain new perspective on kind of what was swirling around me. And okay, how do I actually find myself and my center so that I can operate from a place of calm and clarity? And mindfulness, meditation, all of those things help me find that clarity for myself by taking, and that can be 3 minutes, that can be a walk, that can be an hour, that can be, it comes in all shapes and sizes. And I love how Michelle said that, because it isn't a one size fit all. And we're also in a society that wants the, like, tell me exactly how to do it. And so it's like the pendulum, right? Nobody's doing it. We really want to get them to here, but in order to get them to here, we need to swing them all the way over to here to try something, to then get back to the center point of, oh, I can do it however I want, right? And so I think that's why a lot of these things in trending is really beautiful, because we're opening up the other side of the spectrum. So hopefully people can find the middle point for themselves.
Michelle, does that resonate?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's awareness of rather than suffering from your environment, your emotions, your experience. I always love that quote from Viktor Frankl, who was working on a manuscript while in a concentration camp in World War II, Jewish psychoanalyst. He was in the worst possible circumstance you could imagine. He had no freedom at all, barely food, sick people dying all around him every day, and plus the mass executions. And he was able to come up with what is one of the most well-known and basic tenets of mindfulness, and that is between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space is your freedom to choose. And I love that saying. In fact, I just decided I'm going to get a plaque or something and put that up in my house. But you do really have, like I was talking about the difference between the cafeteria and the buffet, you really do have the freedom to choose when you have the control over your response to whatever the stimulus is. You get to choose your life. And if somebody in that type of a circumstance can come up with something like that, we can all do it.
Well, it does give us some hope. Absolutely. It sure does.
Yeah.
And so not to discredit that, because I want that to land, as Carrie says, with our audience, and land appropriately. I do want to kind of go back, and because Carrie's taught me some stuff, and we're going to get into that in about 15 minutes. And so she's taught me, and Michelle, this goes back to what you were saying. It's not, this is how it works. This is what you do. Use it. It's, wow, Keith, you are meditating, because I do a couple of things when I hike, and by golly, today's hike was 15.5 miles. And yeah, I did that prior to joining everybody on the call. So I'm not a hero, I'm just stupid. So that's just crazy. But I said that to say most of my time on the trail is done in darkness. And so again, this is where the crazy stuff comes in. I'm on the trail at 3:30 a.m. So we in the military, and your husband would know this, zero dark 30. And so nobody else is up in the world. I'm out there on the trail, and the only other thing out there is deer and rabbits and critters that are on the trail with me. I'm counting because I don't have it here, but I hold my flashlight in case I ever need it. I don't keep it on because I want my eyes to become accustomed to the darkness because I want them on the Appalachian Trail. Nighttime, it's going to be dark. And so I want to be able to see in the darkness. Now, I'm not saying I got special abilities, but I want my body to adjust. What I'm saying is I'll hold it for 100 paces and then I switch hands and I hold it for 100 paces. So I'm counting to 100. Every left foot is 100 steps. And so that keeps my mind off of the fact that I've got 30 pounds on my back and I've got 5 hours to go. So I don't think about all that stuff. I could be present in the hike. My mind can free to go wherever it's got to go, and my body can move forward. And I move forward, and that's actually intentional too. So I say that to say, Carrie said, well, you got it. Because I don't have, after that, I don't have time to sit on the floor and cross my legs and this 54-year-old body crossing their legs. But I can calm myself. I can be present in the hike. And what that has taught me with some other things, I can be present in these conversations. I can listen to what people are saying. I can validate where they are. And so Eileen has taught me that. And then Carrie has also taught me 3 words. I could use 3 words that I could kind of sit here and prior to any conversation, I could think about the conversation, be present in the conversation before the conversation actually occurs. And so when I'm in the conversation, and that's actually worked. And so I didn't do it for any of you prior to this call to say, come into this call with 3 words in your subconscious, but all the same. I see that Marlene, Mir, and Sarah Cotterill are on the call. So we're going to jump into that. Michelle, how can we buy your book? How can we get in touch with you? What can you leave our audience before our part of the conversation's over? Leave something powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, I before I go into that, I just want to say, being a grief educator and being in the suicide loss space, my little tip, suicide is very stigmatized. And one of the ways it's stigmatized is the way we talk about it. Someone committed suicide. Committed is usually associated with a crime. So I'm going to encourage everyone who's listening right now to switch to saying died by or died from suicide rather than using committed, because that helps the suicide loss community to destigmatize the loss. So I just felt I heard it enough times on the call today. I felt I had to share that.
Okay.
So my books, the best way to find me or anything about me is to go to my website, inhabitjoy.com. And it's a little glitchy right now because I'm going through a remodel, of course. But you can find me that way. And all of my books are for sale. My 2 most recent ones that came out a year ago you should be able to find them everywhere. If you want to do something other than Amazon, I recommend you go to powellsbooks.com. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and Powell's is our big landmark here. Brags to be the biggest bookstore in the world. I don't know that that's true, but the fact that they say that and it's right here in my hometown, it's kind of sweet. So, and I would leave you with just find something that works to be able to be kinder to yourself. take a moment to be aware when you're calling yourself an idiot or when you're being hard on yourself. No, you know what? Even with all these practices and experience, I cut my finger the other day with a knife in the kitchen and I called myself an idiot. And then I noticed I haven't done that in so long. And to be honest, it was a dumb thing to do. I was using a wrong size knife for the chore that I was doing. It was a mistake, and you can still see the cut right there. But still, does that help anything at all? No. So taking a breath, bringing in the awareness, how can I treat myself in such a way that improves my health and well-being, improves my connections with others? Calling yourself an idiot is not on that list. So, yeah, it's so great to see everyone on the call and to be with you again, Keith. And thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for this conversation as always. You're welcome to stay, but if you've got things to do, I do understand. Only because, not because I'm trying to rush the conversation, but I have not eaten since like 9 o'clock. We're going to go. I'm going to have the conversation with Sarah, Marlene, and Carrie. We're going to have this conversation now, and then I'm going to go eat because hiking 15 miles, I did eat. So I did eat prior. I did eat after. But like I said, it's, from 9:30 to whatever time it is now, Eastern time. Carrie, Sarah, Marlene, hi, how are you doing? Oh, Rick, what you got? You're muted, man.
No. You were saying whatever time it was, I was 1-1.
Oh, okay. All right, it's 1 o'clock. So it's 3.5 hours since I've last eaten. And if you've pumped out 15 miles on a trail, all good.
Indeed, Keith.
Sarah, welcome to the call. Marlene, and so you're cat a corner on my view. Good to see you all again. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
How are things going? Before we kind of jump into the conversation, I just want to say, hey, thank you for joining me here today. I know everybody here is busy, but the two of you, and I'm speaking about Sarah and Carrie, you are doing something called the Wisdom Well, if that's correct. Can you speak to that real quickly, and then we're going to jump into our conversation. So let's talk about what that is first. Please.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Sarah.
Carrie.
Okay. All right, I'll kick us off and you fill in what I miss. So a couple of things. The Wisdom Well is kind of nested under our overall organization called the Human Array. And the Wisdom Well is a way for us to learn how to gather again. Because so much of this conversation has been around community, finding people, etc. And through the last, now it's going to be 4 years of time, we have lost our social skills and our social network. And so we felt really inspired to find a way not just to gather people, but actually inspire and make it a little bit easier and more attainable to gather their own people wherever they are in the world. And so the Wisdom Well is really a framework of a gathering that we've constructed that allows you to kind of jump into deep conversations with people a couple layers deeper than your standard conversation. And the reason for that is, we're jumping into all my nuggets for our conversation, but
Okay.
It takes 60 hours, or the research has been somewhere between 50 and 60 hours to build a connection with somebody. And our hypothesis is, while that may be true if you're only exchanging time at the water cooler at the office or in the pickup line at school or whatever that is, you never get to like the heart of conversation. So getting to know somebody takes a long time. If we can gather with people that we feel we resonate with and ask deeper questions, can we actually build that connection faster so that we all feel a greater sense of belonging? And so that's the inspiration for the Wisdom Well.
Nothing to add, sir.
We can go on and on for
Yeah.
hours about
Okay.
the Wisdom Well, and that is an excellent summary.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. And so thank you both. And so my conversation now will focus with Marlene, Sarah, and Carrie. And there's a lot to, I intentionally had you come on last as kind of like the last hurrah. This is kind of, we're going to wrap everything up because we've been talking about having conversations, connecting. We've been dealing with the emotional part of who we are as human beings, pulling all, that all together in what you're now talking about and what we've mentioned before in previous conversations, the lost, no, I want to get this right, the ancient truth of community. But this starts really with Marlene. But before we can get into that conversation, Marlene, Sarah, Carrie, introduce yourselves and real briefly what gets you to this conversation today, please.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Keith. Hello, everybody. Really good to be here with you today. My name is Marlene Muir, and I am a loving witness and a space holder for people to really know and express their fullest and most optimal being. And Carrie and Sarah and I met through a like-minded health and wellness community where we all were drawn together to raise our optimal health and really explore it at a deep cellular level and really tie it in with living systems that Sarah really talks about, the ecosystems, our unique ecosystems, and really to stop looking outside of ourselves for the answers and remember, going back to that ancient sacred truth, remember who we are as sovereign body, mind, spirit, and realign with that so that we can make better. It starts with the mind. We can realign again to know and think so that we make better decisions that then impact our health and not the other way around. Everybody always thinks, well, you start with the behavior first, and then that changes everything. But that's why the behavior runs out of gas pretty quick. When people say, well, I don't have enough willpower, or da da da, right? Well, if you start with the mind, then the behavior follows. So nice to be here. Thank you.
Sarah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Cotterill, and Keith knows this is a hard question for us because we like to go beyond just the CV or the resume. So if you took some of my top values, I would say I'm curious, I'm a learner, I am an eternal optimist, um, and I am a believer in regenerative systems. And if you go with some of my skill sets, I'm a lawyer by training. I'm the mother of two teenagers. I'm an entrepreneur, and Carrie and I are partners, and we are building a marketplace and a community of a whole new type that is global and never been done before.
Wow, then that's, how do we do that, Carrie? How do we do that? Who are you, Carrie?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, gosh, I feel so honored just to be in the presence of these people. It makes me so happy to hear them speak so highly of themselves because they're such beautiful people. So hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Allen, and um, here's what I know to be true about myself. I'm extremely passionate. I care deeply about people and experiencing them in their fullest potential. I believe that at its core, if we can see and recognize each other as amazing people, one, first ourselves, and then those around us, we can achieve amazing things. And so I'm really energized and motivated to support people finding themselves and doing that in a safe an authentic space in a community, finding their people that are going to bring out truly the best in them. It literally lights me on fire every time I see it happen. And so that energizes me in many different ways, with my kids at home, with my husband, with my close friends, with my family, with people I'm meeting every day. Community is everywhere around us, and we need to relearn the ancient truth and to create the ancient future, which is marrying that came before with the technology and the advancements that we've created, rather than rejecting any options that are out there. How can we actually bring it all together? So yes, that's me.
So let's talk about that first. So typically when we ask somebody, and I'm going to reference the fact that the four of us, so me and the three ladies here, have been on another Envision Speakers series conversation, which has not been public yet. So in case you're wondering, you're not going to find it on my YouTube channel or on Apple Podcast. It's not been published yet. But in that conversation, we went and did this because it was a relevant need, meaning that we typically introduce ourselves by title, and the three of you were pulling away from that and pulling away from that very intentionally. Talk to me about that. Why was it relevant? And then I had to do it, and which was difficult for me because it's easy to say, well, I'm a doctor, right? I'm a podcast host. I am a father, whatever all those titles are. And, the three of you are saying, well, who are you really? Who is Keith? And I'm still finding out who that person is. So talk to me about why that's now important and why you practice it as part of who you are as a person, please. And I want to hear from all three of you.
Maybe I'll start and I'll say from my own personal experience, I stepped out of my role as a lawyer. It's been about 6 years now. And I really looked around and was like, uh-oh, who am I? Right? Like there was a little bit of a crisis there, right? I had always defined myself by here's my resume. It says that I went to this school. I did these things in college. I then was part of these organizations. I held these leadership positions, and I was a healthcare lawyer through, these different things. And so then when you make a pivot and you're like, oh God, what am I now? I had to totally look within and say, okay, I'm not my job. There are things, there are skill sets, there are mindsets, there are all those things that I acquired and earned and kind of figured out as part of that, but that's not 100% of who I am and how I operate. And so for me, that was the beginning of really starting to look at it differently. And I think when we look at it differently, it allows us to anchor into some of those values that really will probably be true our whole lives, but they can shift and change. And it gives us the ability to be more flexible and change and grow and evolve. Because if we're always exactly what the four corners of our resume says, how exciting is that? It's not very, right? Then we're just stuck.
Marlene?
Yeah, well said, Sarah. I can piggyback off that by saying when we identify ourselves through our roles, it's labeling. And whenever we label something, we condense it to the density of the contents. So I want a label on a product I'm consuming so that I know what's in it, right? But I don't want a label on myself, and I certainly don't want a label on others, because what it immediately does then is take this vast miracle of a human being and condense it down to this. And not only this, but my expectation of what that is. And so not speaking from a role really allows the entirety of the human being to be expressed. And that's really the point.
I love it.
Yeah, as I heard both of them speak, I think the word that just kept coming up for me was limitless, right? That all of those things set limits, set boundaries to who I am. I love that, Marlene. It's so perfect, which is the expectation, right? So this, similar to Sarah, because we have all the same thoughts sometimes, is like, I left the corporate world as well. I had a toxic work environment that pushed me into where I am now. So I am incredibly grateful for that experience. And I can also look back at my whole life. And while that may have been my need to remember who I was, I've always had parts of this within me. And I can remember very young in my career, being frustrated that everyone was trying to teach me how to interview people to hire for my team, and that you ask these questions, and these are the things you need to know about them. And I never did that because I wanted to know who they were. I wanted to just have a conversation with this person, right? Because I was trying to get to know them as a person. Wait, I'm going to work with this person. And so I sit here many, many, many years later and kind of laugh about these instances where I'm like, that is who I am. That's always who I've been. I lost some of that for a while, and I'm so grateful to be back to it. And all of those experiences are precisely why we have this amazing opportunity to explore within ourselves. And I heard something once that changed me and how I think about my kids. Why do we ask them what they want to be when they grow up? And we force them into one option. Instead, allow all the things that they are or want to explore and be. And it changes everything when you think about it that way, that, yeah, right, I want to be a cook and I want to be a dancer. And you know what? I'm all of those things too. So why am I setting limits or expectations to who I am or what I can be? Instead, keep the doors wide open and be curious. Because, as I like to say, curiosity empowered the cat rather than killed the cat. So let's rewrite that one too while we're at it.
Excellent.
And I do think it's kind of important to say, like, in today's world, we're not telling you to 100% throw out your resume, right? Like, there is a purpose in place for those things. And you can think about yourself beyond those labels. So it really isn't an either or, it's a both.
I brought you into this conversation because of the very fact that communities are dead. But you have a model and a mission of revitalizing what a community one should look like and how it should be practiced. So let's dive into that conversation. I'm looking at the clock, but one, why are they dead? Why are communities not what we think they should be, and why are they not working? Let's answer that question first, because we want to solve that. And I know the three of you have the solution. Why is it not work? Why is the idea of community today in 2024 not what we think it is? And why is it not working?
Well, it started a long time ago, actually, with the idea of being independent, that we weren't family units anymore. We weren't tribes anymore. We weren't neighborhoods anymore. I mean, when I grew up a long time ago, everybody knew everybody. You know, the kids, we never were inside. We were on our own at all times, on our bikes, riding around town. We could walk into any of the stores. Hi, Mr. So-and-so. I'm Miss So-and-so. You know, everybody watched out for each other. That was the old model. And somewhere between then and now, very rapidly, there was this whole new narrative in place. You know, go it alone, be independent, move to the city, you know, live in neighborhoods, but don't talk to anybody. And it wasn't really this said thing much as it just happened. You know, like I lived in this neighborhood I called Pleasantville. Everybody had these beautiful houses, but literally you never saw anyone. Literally the garage doors would open, the cars would come out, people would go to work. That was the garage door would close. You'd never see anyone. I was the only one out walking, right? I walked all the time, every day, you know, waving at people, and they looked at me like I was crazy. And then, you know, garage doors open, car goes in, garage door closed. That's it. So that's what's happened. People have become more and more disconnected and isolated. And I think the gift of the last 3 years has really made a lot of people go, what happened? This is not a lifestyle. Humans are meant to be in collectives. People need to be seen. And there's even substantial scientific substantiation through physics and quantum mechanics called the Heisenberg effect. That which is observed changes the thing that's observed. And only when something is observed does it change. And so you can, which is why you can go and do your own thing and, you know, meditate forever and sit by yourself and have these grand ideas. And if you don't interact with anybody or nobody observes you, you just have this whole world in your head. But when you're observed or you observed others, then that whole field expands exponentially. So really the solution, Keith, is moving away from the solo container and getting reconnected and reestablished in a network of supportive people, both physically and around the globe.
Sarah, it looks like you're about to jump into that conversation.
My mind is going a million different ways, 100% what Marlene said. And I mean, I think part of it, the crux of that is we have written ourselves out of the definition of nature. So if you look in the dictionary, it's like birds and bees and plants, except humans. And at what point do we think that we are not nature? And as that nature, we are the highest form of technology. I think part of what is happening is technology is amazing in so many ways, right? Like it allows us to gather here. It allows people to join us in conversation. We can call up our friends. You know, I just talked to somebody yesterday that was in Singapore, right? Amazing. And at the same time, we live in this kind of artificial intimacy. We live in almost like an assisted living world where it's like, okay, Maps is going to tell me how to go here. Netflix is going to tell me what to watch. A dating app may tell you who to date. It goes on and on and on. And so we're sitting here, we're just being told, and we've forgotten this highest form of technology, and that we as humans have a fundamental need to be connected. And so we are living in this artificial intimacy. We've got, I think Esther Perel says we've got, you know, 1 million Facebook friends and nobody to feed our cat. And that's what we're working to change.
Just before Carrie, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, to connect what both of them are saying, I think what I've been feeling is these communities of isolation, which is a technology that it's just like everything they said is exactly right. And I would offer it in a way that we disconnected ourselves from nature. We have been building technology to learn. The pendulum is swinging for us from one side to the other in order for us to find the center again. And in doing so, we think we can be smarter than nature and build technology that's going to make us better, more connected. And what it did was push us all the way to the other side of the spectrum, where we then disconnected from anybody in our presence. And we don't know how to do that because we've connected broader, right? So it's nothing is good, bad, right, or wrong. It's really the pendulum swinging. And so as you reach this moment in time where we are at the other side of the arc, you see that I live in one of those neighborhoods that everybody, I say this all the time to my neighbors. We are neighbors. We want to get together. And how come we can't? What is this that's literally feels like it's a force field between us? And I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. And it's because the connection is considered in the house, is on my phone, is on my computer, rather than outdoors, right? And so how can we bring those things together so that we can actually connect in person in proximity as well as across the world and say all of this is beautiful, and what's the rhythm and balance so that it does feel in harmony rather than one side of the spectrum, the pendulum or the spectrum than the other. And I think that what Sarah said is exactly how I feel of that. It requires a connection to nature and understanding that we're a part of it and we are all part of it together rather than separate from each other. And so how can we bring ourselves back into that space of coherence?
I think it's a little bit like the frog in the boiling water. We didn't know. We were doing the next right thing and the next right thing. And then we find ourselves here and we look around, and I would posit that most people on this call growing up were allowed to go and run around, right? You went outside, you ran in nature, you had your groups of friends that you ran around with. And not only did you figure out, like, okay, if I get super hot, I need to drink water, right? Because it's hot outside, and like this is the way a tree falls. And, if I step on a rotted tree, I'm gonna, you know, punch through it and scrape my knee, all of those types of things. But you also were like, ooh, I don't really like this friend today. And they did this, it was frustrating me, but there was a self-regulation that happened within those groups. And that's the muscle I think we've lost, because you used to, and some groups and families can still do this, but you'd sit around the kitchen table and you would argue about everything, right? It would be politics, it would be this, it would be that. Like and it was contentious and you could feel it. And then somebody would be like, oh, this apple pie is amazing. Right. And you'd be like, it is amazing. And then you'd go back. That doesn't happen quite as well. We've lost some of that muscle to do that. And I watch my kids and I watch their friends, and I watch people in the world. It's like, you said something that offended me. Now I'm never speaking to you. I've shut you down. I've ghosted you. I've done all of these things. I think in part because we haven't practiced that back and forth, because we've lived here, not even knowing it and thinking it was connecting us more than ever.
So what's the solution? Because I met the two of you through Marlene, and I forget how I met Marlene, but somewhere in all of this, there's a journey. And my book's about a journey, and your journey is about intrinsic health. But we need to cut to the chase because there has to be a solution, because that's what these conversations are all about. Marlene, let's start with you. How do we get to the solution? Because then we have to get to the solution. How do we get to the solution? What do we got to figure out?
Well, the first thing you have to figure out is what draws you together. What are the values, the intentions, the goal? So if it's a neighborhood wanting to build sustainable gardening that everybody participates in, that's going to draw the people together that resonates with them. So that's step one. You have to find a way to connect with others. And then the second is to create a kind of consistent and safe environment where people do feel that they can show up and be authentic, because we have lost the ability to sit around, and we have, behind our roles and behind our screens, we can be anybody we want. And as soon as the screen goes off, we could be a crabbed beast for all anybody knows, but so there's that. And then the third thing is to be consistent in being committed. You can be interested in community, but you're not going to actually participate. And being in a community is both giving and receiving. It has to be a reciprocal connection. And then when that happens, then and only then can one move beyond oneself to then think of the higher, think of the collective, start doing things from there. And then from that, then that's where all these great collaborations come from, and the businesses start, and all of this. This is where all of this came from. And then you continue to build it, continue to build on the physical. You can continue to do a hybrid. I mean, there are so many different ways that you can build that, but it kind of goes in that. That's kind of the 6 steps that I was able to delineate.
So before, I really briefly mentioned the journey of intrinsic health, and hopefully I keep on asking, did I get that right?
You did.
Real briefly touch on that, because that's kind of the backbone of everything that you're sitting under or over, or somehow it's connected.
Yeah, well, I have the honor and the pleasure to oversee all of it. So I am the heart and the soul and the voice. And I created from nothing an international community that we have witnessed and walked thousands of people through an 8-week health journey. And then after they finish the 8-week journey, then they stay in community for up to a year. And then in the community, we build experiential workshops so people can get to meet other people in the community. Now, this is an online space created so that you didn't really sense that the screen was a problem, because it is that safe space where people can come and they can we cry, we laugh, we cuss, we ask for help, and before the end of a support group, somebody's already got a solution headed to somebody in Europe and they're sitting in California. I mean, that's how it works. So that's how we all met in that container.
How do we get there, Carrie, Sarah? How do we get to the solution? I'm not talking about the solution yet. How do we get there? What do we got to figure out?
I'm going to start with 100%. I think Marlene's steps are exactly how I feel. I would only pull out one thread from that, which is the spark. That oftentimes there is a person who feels a need or a gap or identifies something for themselves that they don't want to feel alone anymore. And that can be literally anything. It can be, oh, I want to learn to draw. I want to find other people that want to learn to draw. Or it can be, I'm a mom and I am suffering through what's happening in my child's life right now. How do I find, I can't be the only one that's experiencing this. How do I find those other people, right? So no matter what that purpose or thing is, it starts with one person who's the spark. And so what I would expand upon of Marlene's content and steps is that first part is perhaps, oh, you don't want me to go to solutions.
Not yet. Just want to figure out how do we get to that solution.
So there's an important part in the beginning, which is the spark.
Okay.
That is identifying that need and knowing that that's really important and that there are others like you.
Okay, then that brings us to Sarah. Well, how do we get to the solution? What needs to happen?
So I don't think there's a solution. I don't
Okay,
think
well, we're not talking about solutions. How do we get there?
I
What needs
know.
to change? Okay.
I don't think there is a solution, and I don't think there is a path.
Okay.
I think the kind of root cause and the issues are different for each one of us, ever so slightly. So if you set that aside, I will say from my own personal experience, so take this N of one, I would say, historically undervalued the importance of community. So for me, how I got to community and solutions was I realized that to show up as my best, and originally best was what's the thing I can achieve? How do I, get the best results in my job? How do I get the best grades? How am I, the best athlete? All of those kind of best types of things. And it moved into how am I the best parent for my children, right? Things that are a little bit squishier in how you would define them. But for me, it was, if I am not regulated in my own body, if I am not able to have a clear mind, to be healthy, to be out of pain, to be well rested, to be hydrated, then I can't see a single solution. I'm grouchy. I have a super short fuse. I really am not creative at all. I can't think of any solutions. And so the path for me personally is to regulate nervous system, emotional system, all of those things. And then it starts to give me the space to find the path and to deal with the circuitousness of it. Is that even a word?
It is. It's a perfect word. Rick, I know you're listening hard. Before I ask these ladies for a solution, any insights on your side of the world? What's some insights?
First of all, this is a special time this day, and I wanted to bring it up because it does have to do with community. It has to do with humans coming together, and I'd like for us to just take a moment from an international perspective to honor our Jewish brothers and sisters on this day of international mourning and recognition of the Holocaust.
Okay.
I think that's important that we all never forget that bringing community together can help stop the kind of thing that happened back then and what's attempting to happen now. So I just wanted to bring that up real quick. And
Okay.
It
Okay.
affects me pretty deeply that that we're going through this whole damn thing again. But so on, and having brought that forward, um, I think that I really like what Sarah said. I really feel, I mean, I've got a formula too, just like Marlene does, right? I've got the hope formula. Honesty, omnipotence, pure love, and essence will get you to where you need to live a happy and prosperous life. Marlene's got her 6 steps. I think it's 6 or is it 8? 6?
It's 8 steps.
It's 8 steps. Yeah. Okay. I thought so. Yeah. Because I listened to that the other day. And by the way, I've got a clip for you as well, Marlene, and all of you. I've got clips for all of you. So anyway, to bring it back, and I'm trying to build physical communities as well as the virtual space for communities for people to have solitude and ability to talk and do the things they need to do to heal and figure out how to reawaken the very principles that have been programmed out of us by our society and by the way that we've been taught to live, by getting just back down to those 4 universal laws of honesty, omnipotence, true love, and ethics. And so, is it impossible for us to build community again? I don't believe so. I think that it is impossible to build community in the current socioeconomic quagmire that we find ourselves in. So, as my friend Cheyenne would say, we have to get off the fence and we have to dig in and start making changes to help this come about. And all these wonderful people that are on this call today are part of that effort. And so everybody has solutions, but honestly, they all come down to one basic precept. Can anybody tell me what that is?
You have to tell us because we're out of time.
Pure love.
Okay.
Pure love with unadulterated, unconditional expectation of any reciprocity, that you can look at any person, regardless of their skin, their color, their sexual preference, whatever it is. And even though it might pain you, you have to love them. And you have to learn how to love purely, as I've done. And it's a journey. It really is. But we can do that. And I think that's really that's the crux of the matter, is love.
Cool. Rick, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to go back to Marlene, Carrie, and Sarah, excuse me. What do you offer in terms of a solution to bring community, the ancient truth, and I'm going to hold that because Carrie taught me that, the ancient truth of community. What does it got to look like now? What should it look like now? And how do we practice it? Please. And I don't care who goes first.
I guess I'll go first. I think the first place is to know that it's within you. It's within each of us, this desire to belong. It's in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It is a human truth, not just an ancient truth. I say it's an ancient truth only because we've forgotten how critical it is to us in our pursuit of learning more beyond what we already knew. And so I say the spark because if you're feeling that desire or that gap or that ache for community, you can start it. It doesn't belong outside of you, it belongs within you. And there's multiple ways to do that, as Sarah articulated, right? Every person has their own journey. That's what's beautiful about it. It is a beautiful web of every thread that makes up this humanity that we live in, and they're all different and unique. And so you can learn from others, and within you holds the key to your own journey and path. And so if you're feeling it, take the next best step. Share it, be seen, be witnessed, allow for misalignment, meaning if it doesn't land with somebody, that's okay. It's not about you or your challenge. You're really tuning yourself to where does it land so that I can find my people that are going to support me in this, which becomes the wheel of community and personal growth. But it starts within you. And that's why I think the spark is so important. We're each sparks in our own way, and showing up, consistency, continued pursuit of that belonging, sometimes isn't easy. It can be very challenging to find the right people to get to that space. But once you're there, it's like nothing you've ever experienced before. Your body like loses half of its mass, I swear, just to be held, because you're held in community. Like that is a sensation and a feeling in your body that is like none other. And so I think that's what I would say about the solution at this point.
Sir?
Yeah, I mean, Carrie and I talk a lot about that it's no longer the survival of the fittest, it's the survival of those that fit together. And at the same time, community is inconvenient. And
what do you mean by that?
I mean, it's not
inconvenient.
Community, and some of it is you have to show up. We don't always feel like showing up. Think about it. When you're training to hike the Appalachian Trail, right? There are mornings when you're like, it's freaking 3 a.m. It's cold. I do not want to get out of bed. I do
Wait
not
a
want
second. No. Yeah, but no, because I'm now dedicated. And so, I mean,
Why
bingo.
can't you be
2 weeks
dedicated to your
ago,
health
it
and
was like
wellness and
18
community?
degrees outside in Virginia. I'm still doing it. Yeah, inconvenient,
Bingo.
but I'm still doing it.
And that's community right there. You say, I am dedicated to either my own personal health, well-being, this feeling inside, and or this small group of people. Maybe it's a larger group of people, but guess what? When my best friend has her mother in the hospital, right? I don't go, oh, well, I was going to get, a manicure or something, right? Which clearly I don't get a manicure, but anyway, or I was going to go to yoga class. It's like, nope, I will miss yoga today because I need to show up for you. And that's what we do in community. And so in some ways it's the same thing. It's getting up and hiking the Appalachian Trail. It's lifting weights. It's putting in the time and the effort, even when it's not easy. Because sometimes all you can give is your presence.
Yeah.
That's it. Sometimes we just sit, and that's what people need more than anything. They need that feeling of, okay, I have this person I can call. I know Marlene has had example after example in the online groups that she's met of, oh my gosh, because this group was here, because it was able to hold space, there have been crises averted, there have been dramatic transformations. And for me, like I said, I undervalued community. And I got to this point where I was like, okay, I've done all of these things. And then I figured out that it is in community, it's on that edge where the real growth happens. Because you do have the people you're accountable. You do have the people that are going to push you. You have the people that are be like, Sarah, you said you wanted to show up this way. Is that the way you feel like you're showing up? And then you're like, oh, shoot. But it's where the real growth happens. And, to Carrie's point, it is within us. And I think we have to give ourselves grace on the path. Richard talked about love. It's all about love. There's some days, some moments, sometimes you can't feel it. You can't feel it for yourself. Right. So in those moments, it's like, okay, I can't feel it for myself. Can you feel it for my dog? Great. I'm going to give my dog a little extra love. Right. I'm going to give this person a little bit. And then again, it's back to that muscle. You're exercising that muscle of doing it a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And you're finding your community. And the other piece, and then I'll stop talking, that I think we need to normalize a little bit more is failure. I think we need to look at failure differently. So if we walk into a group, we finally get up, okay, I'm going to join this group. And you get in there and you're like, I didn't say anything. Or it didn't feel like it connected with me. Okay, Is that because you need to sit there longer? Is that because it's not the right group for you? Is that because you didn't feel like you had anything to say? Do you need to come back? But it's okay. Like the first time doesn't have to be it. It doesn't have to be like, okay, well, I tried this and it didn't work, so I'm out and I'm done. We need a longer runway and we need to expect. It's like if you went out and you dated 5 people and you're like, oh, I didn't find the person I'm going to marry. I'm no longer looking. No, you might need to date 500 people. So I just think we need to reframe how we're looking at the communities we come into, how we belong, and how we show up within those.
It's good. It's good. And Mitch Gray talked about life is always practice. Every day is a practice. You don't have to get it right. You don't even have to ever get it right. You just have to show up. Keep on doing it. Marlene, this is all about you.
Yeah.
The journey of intrinsic health is all about community. You have built an online international community.
Yes, indeed.
What does that look like?
And it started as soon as Rick said, what's the one thing? And I said, love. And it is. Love is the answer. I don't care what the question is. It's always love, because love is a verb. Love is something that we express. If you are in love and being of love and with love and for love, it is this never ending reciprocal energy exchange. So that's number one. And commitment. You have to be committed. You have to be committed to yourself. You have to be committed to the intentional. You have to stay the course, because if you're interested, on the days you're not interested, you're not going to show up. And those days might become more frequent. And then you're just going to go, that didn't work. I'm not going to do it. If you're committed, something drew you there in the first place. So use that spark, come in fully, and participate. And then the other really interesting thing is David Hawkins created that great scale of energy. And everybody used to think that love was the highest frequency that any person could hold emotionally. Well, guess what? Guess what's above love? Authenticity. So it's when we show up, and that's what brings us full circle. Did you like how I did that, Keith? Brought it all the way back to where we started with be, who are you? When we answer that very fundamental question and we drop in and become aligned and embodied with who I am in that great expression from love, then we are authentic, which raises it even more. And energy is infinite. And that's how we're going to do this thing.
Then you've answered my question.
Hoorah.
Hoorah is right. That's December 5. With that being said, what are the three of you doing in 2024 and beyond? Anything that we need to know before we drop this call? What's going on?
Oh, there's so much going on.
Well, give me some highlights, and then what we'll do is I'm going to share it with everybody who I can share it with. What's going on?
I love it. I would say for Carrie and I that we would love everybody to come in and check out the Human Array, www.thehumanarray.com. There's our website, and then it will take you over to the community. So whether you are looking to be connected with coaches, healers, conscious entrepreneurs, whether you're looking for connection, that's there. Whether you are a conscious entrepreneur, a solopreneur, basically everybody that's looking on this call, and you want to promote more of what you're doing, we want to cheerlead you on and raise you up.
I know I need a cheerleader.
Yeah.
I talk about it in my book, but I definitely need a cheerleader.
Little did I know that my high school cheerleading, 2 semesters would come in so handy in the long term. I've got the sparkle fingers and everything. So that's the Human Array. Under the platform of the Human Array is the Wisdom Well series. Carrie, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the Wisdom Well series is a monthly occurrence. We take all these topics around community and we dig into them for about 20 or 30 minutes with all the tools and resources you need to learn how to host your own gatherings again. Meaning we offer invitations, recipes, ideas of who you should have join you, how to host a dinner party and a gathering questions, very curated questions to encourage that deeper level of conversation. And then that's kind of the social wisdom well. We also have a corporate version because we believe that right now corporate culture is struggling because people feel like they have to be in proximity, but there's actually a way to build those connections without forcing everybody to be back in the office. So we're coming forward with the new lunch and learn, if you will, of a corporate wisdom well version. And that's just an adaptable framework that works in many different ways. And so we're excited to share more of our wisdom that we hope sparks the wisdom within you and helps you create that experience with those around you.
Yeah, and kind of to that point, if anybody has an idea, a thought, something they want to kind of banter back and forth on, Carrie and I love those. So don't be afraid to reach out to us.
Yeah. If any of this resonated in any way, shape, or form, I can talk about it for days and months and years. So please, love to hear how it lands for other people, what it sparks for them, because that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And Marlene is one of those sparks for us.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
So
On
we'll
that
leave.
note, so not only is the international community, the Journey of Intrinsic Health happening, we're about to start our spring cohort in February. So people can find all about it at the Journey of Intrinsic, not the Journey of journeyofintrinsichealth.com, which I put the link in the chat. And personally, I am really excited. I've been life coaching for 24 years. I just started my 24th year this year. And I'm going to be doing a really exciting thing with my best friend who's an astrologer. And we are going to do Above and Within when your soul's blueprint meets the boots on the ground. And it is going to be funny. And we're going to do it live. And we're going to have a real person. And we're going to look at their chart. Here's what's going on. Here's your chart. Here's some life coaching. And it's going to be a blast. So I'm really excited about that. That's what's coming for me.
Excellent. I appreciate that. And then from my perspective, envisionspeakers.com is a real thing. It just published Thursday, Friday. And so it's going to be a daily thing for me to upgrade and expand. And so for everybody who's been on this call and everybody who's ever been on the Envision Speaker series from its onset, its inception, and throughout the rest of eternity, as long as I'm alive. Anyway, envisionspeakers.com. I want to give each of you a page, your own landing page linked from your specific profiles. So add all that content. And of course, I'm going to be getting in touch with each one of you individually to see how we can pull that and kind of collaborate with that. And so for those of you who have been watching for 4 hours or however amount of time that you've been watching and listening, thank you all on the World Wide Web. And for those specifically on the Zoom call, thank you so much. I've always appreciated the conversations. I'm going to have more conversations with all of you in the future. But for today, thank you.
Thank you.
Love and gratitude.
Bye, everybody.
Love you. Love you all.
Y'all take care. Have a great day.
Thank
See you, man. Go get something to eat.
Some food.
I sure will.
Bye.